Chapter 902. Looking at the broken ruby on the compass, old ancestor Poisonous Dragon's eyes became darker and darker. On the other hand, Venerate Aoxian said calmly, "Fellow Taoist Poisonous Dragon, you don't have to worry about this. One ancient statue has been destroyed and there are still 6 more. As long as we can find an ancient statue within 6 days, there's still a chance to salvage the situation of awakening the ancient passage." Fellow Taoist Aoxian is right. I was too emotional. Old ancestor Poisonous Dragon took a deep breath and calmed himself down. He kept the compass and closed his eyes to continue recuperating. Inferior innate level Bao spirit. The words of the candle Bao spirit made Ning Fan's eyes flicker. He did not stop using his abilities. He pointed his index finger forward and the power of heaven and earth immediately whistled out, forming a seal that froze the young Bao spirit who was charging at him in the sky. His 5 fingers pressed forward again, and a powerful force spread out. At this moment, Ning Fan had activated the secret word of force to its limit. The young Bao spirit could not move at all. He groaned in pain and gradually, more and more seals appeared in his body. The ferocity in his eyes was suppressed bit by bit. He let out an unwilling roar and turned into a blood-red iron Bao. Ning Fan's expression was still cold. He bent his palm and waved, keeping the blood Bao in his hand. He glanced around and nodded without saying anything. Sensing that the young Bao spirit was subdued by Ning Fan, the sealed spirit of the candle Bao in the profound Yin world became even more excited. "Master, did you catch the innate level Bao spirit that time? Quickly give it to me to devour. This is a great tonic, really a great tonic." Noisy. Hearing that the Bao spirit was still making noise, Ning Fan frowned and let out a cold snort. He activated the seal in his body. All of a sudden, the Bao spirit let out a series of miserable cries and could no longer speak. There were many types of weapon spirits. Swords had sword spirits and axes had axe spirits. This Bao spirit was naturally one of the types of weapon spirits. Among the weapon spirits, there were strong and weak ones. Most of them were divided into 5 grades: mortal grade, immortal grade, acquired grade, inferior innate grade and innate grade. Upon closer inspection, this blood Bao spirit was indeed an inferior innate level Bao spirit. However, Ning Fan had other matters to attend to at the moment, and did not have the time to deal with it. After keeping the seal, Ning Fan's eyes swept across the surroundings and looked at the blood pool not far away. Ning Fan chased after Fan Lianxiu all the way. They had already traveled quite a distance. Other than him, there was only this massive blood pool left in the void space. The blood pool contained too many remnant souls of the barbarians. There were trillions of them, and it was impossible to count them all. They were all packed together. All of these remnant souls were the mortals whom Fan Lianxiu had slaughtered before. At first, all of them were filled with resentment. However, after Ning Fan killed Fan Lianxiu, all of them kowtowed to him 3 times and 9 times. They cried and wailed. Their expressions were filled with gratitude. They were babbling about something. And judging from their expressions, they seemed to be expressing their gratitude. However, they could only make ghostly sounds and could not speak in human language. Once Fan Lianxiu died, the blood pool began to crumble bit by bit. The remnant souls of the barbarians in the blood pool dissipated bit by bit with the wind. They had died long ago in the ancient times. Their remnant souls should not have existed to this day. If the barbarians died, they would no longer be able to enter the cycle of reincarnation because the heavenly Tao of reincarnation in the wilderness had been destroyed in ancient times. Looking at the hundreds of millions of barbarian souls that were dispersing, Ning Fan was powerless to stop them. His eyes were filled with mixed emotions. He activated the Fuli spiritual wheel, trying to use its power to contain these remnant souls. However, he realized that it was impossible. The Fuli spiritual wheel could only contain people who were unyielding even in death. These barbarians were not killed in battle, nor were they unyielding. Therefore, it was impossible to contain them. They were a group of people who were abandoned by the samsara. After they died, they would vanish into thin air. They only had this life and no afterlife. Ning Fan remained silent. He took out a jar of wine from his storage pouch. He opened the mud seal and sprinkled the wine into the blood pool, as a way to send off these barbarians who were abandoned by the samsara. His eyes gradually became blank. At this moment, he seemed to have seen the fate of the barbarians. That fate was like a line. There was a beginning and an end, but there was no turning back. At the same time, he seemed to have understood the fate of the mortals in the 4 heavens and 9 worlds. Their fate was like a circle. They were connected by life and death. Regardless of whether they were alive or dead, they would always be in the circle, repeating the scenes of life and death. That circle was called samsara. The barbarians have lost the right to enter samsara. But what is samsara? At the moment when the last barbarian soul dissipated, Ningfan closed his eyes and stopped thinking. When he opened his eyes again, there was no longer any expression on his face. The blood pool collapsed and the remnant souls dispersed. The only thing that was left was the Joss flames of slaughter that had accumulated in the blood pool. The amount of the Joss flames was incomparably huge. As the blood pool collapsed, the Joss flames spread in all directions like a sea of mist. These Joss flames of slaughter were produced by the dead barbarian's hatred towards the barbarian ancestor. To the innate ghost mask, the accumulation of countless years seemed to have become the most delicious delicacy. Ningfan pondered for a moment, and finally decided to collect these Joss flames of slaughter. He took out a blue and white porcelain vase, and pointed the mouth of the vase at the sea of Joss flames. He chanted the word collect, and the billowing sea of mist immediately flowed into the vase. This porcelain vase was a first Nirvana Heaven immortal treasure. It was unknown which battle it was obtained from. At first, the blue and white porcelain vase was collecting the Joss flames smoothly. However, when it had collected less than 1% of the entire sea of Joss flames, it suddenly split into 2 with a loud bang. All the Joss flames that had been collected flowed back into the sea of mist. This blue and white porcelain vase could not withstand too much Joss flames of slaughter. That was why it was destroyed. A first Nirvana Heaven immortal treasure was the most commonly used magical treasure by early true crossing realm cultivators. However, it could not even collect 1% of the Joss flames in this place. Ningfan's eyes flickered. He took out a third Nirvana Heaven immortal treasure. A third Nirvana Heaven immortal treasure was considered as an extremely powerful magical treasure to any true crossing realm cultivator. The grade of this red copper incense burner was not low. However, it could only collect 1/20th of the Joss flames of the Sea of Mist. Then it exploded and the Joss flames scattered in all directions. There are too many Joss flames of slaughter in this place. Ordinary magical treasures can't withstand this level of Joss flames at all. However, I wonder how powerful a magical treasure is needed to collect all the Joss flames of slaughter in this place. Ningfan turned his hand and took out a 5th Nirvana Heaven Devil banner. He waved it at the Joss flames of slaughter, and the surging Joss flames of slaughter was immediately absorbed into the Devil banner. A 5th Nirvana Heaven immortal treasure was considered as a powerful magical treasure to any cultivator in the empty shedding realm. The 4 minor swords of Ningfan's 5 rain swords was only at the 5th Nirvana Heaven immortal treasure. However, the flag could only absorb 1/5 of the Joss flames of slaughter before it couldn't bear the power of the Joss flames and exploded. There were still a few 6th Nirvana and 7th Nirvana acquired immortal treasures in his storage pouch. Just as he was considering whether he should use these treasures to experiment, he suddenly thought of something. With a flip of his hand, he took out a terrifyingly heavy purple gourd from the profound Een world. This purple gourd was an innate realm gourd. It could be used as a material to refine innate magic treasures. When Ningfan had just arrived in Eastern Heaven, he obtained it by cutting the divine chests on a trading planet called Shaoza. In the past, due to his low cultivation base, he could not even move the gourd. Today, he could already move the gourd slightly with his divine ability, but he didn't have the ability to refine it into a Xiantian magical treasure. Normally, only immortal emperors were qualified to refine innate magic treasures. Naturally, Ningfan was unable to do so. The interior of the purple gourd was hollow, and was naturally suitable for storing things. At this moment, it was taken out by Ningfan as a vessel to contain the Joss flames of slaughter. With the power of the innate gourd, it should be able to withstand the power of the Joss flames. Ningfan lifted the gourd and pointed the mouth of the gourd at the misty sea of Joss flames. Then he muttered the word absorb. Countless streams of Joss flames gushed into the mouth of the gourd. After a few breaths' time, All the Joss flames were absorbed into the gourd, leaving not a single trace behind. The purple gourd did not show any signs of damage even after absorbing such a massive amount of Joss flames. Seeing this, Ningfan nodded, and kept the gourd back into the profound Yin world. There was no point in staying here any longer. Thus he turned around and returned to where he came from. When Ningfan returned, be it the group of cultivators from Zichao's war division, or the 200,000 wild beasts that he brought back, all of them had already landed outside the Heavenly Man City. As soon as they saw Ningfan returning with the baleful qi from killing Fan Lianxiu, the group of cultivators cupped their fists towards the sky. "Senior, thank you for killing that ferocious creature and saving our lives." The 10,000 cultivators shouted at the same time. Their voices naturally resounded through the clouds. The 200,000 wild beasts that were prostrating on the ground raised their heads and let out gentle beastly roars towards the sky, as if they were welcoming Ningfan's return. There were also some human houses that were empty. Normally, they would be arrogant and proud. However, the way they looked at Ningfan was like how juniors would look at their seniors. Even Mounz, old ancestor Jinhua, Teng Nan, Teng Bei and the other human cultivators did not dare to be negligent. All of them cupped their fists towards the sky. If someone did not know what was going on and saw this scene, they would certainly think that they were welcoming a certain immortal venerable of the human race. This kind of extravagance was just too grand. As soon as Ningfan returned, he directly landed on the city wall of the Heavenly Man City. As soon as he landed, the immortal Loli who was jumping around like a monkey giggled sweetly and jumped into Ningfan's arms. She wrapped her arms around Ningfan's neck like an octopus and took in Ningfan's scent. She felt incomparably relieved. "Father, have you already killed old man Shuehun?" Ningfan nodded his head and stroked the silver hair of the little Loli in his arms lovingly. At this moment, the immortal Loli's primordial spirit had already returned to her body. Her complexion was rosy and her small face was radiant. A piece of flesh on her shoulder had been scratched off. However, under Rayleigh's healing, the injury had completely healed. To her, having her primordial spirit captured by the lightning capturing banner was not a tribulation. Instead, it was more like a fortuitous encounter. The sea of lightning in the lightning capturing banner had already been devoured by her. The lightning capturing banner had also been destroyed. As for her qi, it was no longer any weaker than an early thought fragmentation realm cultivator. After putting down the joyful immortal Loli, Ningfan's spirit sense swept across the broken continent. His expression became slightly solemn. Even though he had killed Fan Lianxiu, there were still tens of thousands of cultivators who died in his hands during this battle. Zichao's war division originally had 100,000 guards. Now there were less than 60,000 of them. Even the human cultivators whom Ningfan had saved previously had also died in Fan Lianxiu's hands. Ningfan gently closed his eyes. Once the great chaos began, human lives would become worthless. Only the strong could survive in this great calamity. Teng Nan, Teng Bei and many old monsters of the human race came to greet Ningfan one after another, thanking him for saving their lives. If it wasn't for Ningfan's timely arrival, all of them would probably have died in Fan Lianxiu's hands this time. In front of these old monsters of the human race, Ningfan used the identity of Zhao Jian. To Zhao Dai, Fairy Han Wu, Earth Devil and the others who were familiar with him, Ningfan secretly transmitted his voice to remind them not to reveal his true name in front of outsiders. Then, he briefly told them about how he saved the immortal Loli's primordial spirit. During this trip, Ningfan brought back 200,000 savage beasts, Mounz, old ancestor Jinhua and other helpers. After devouring the sea of lightning in the lightning capturing banner, immortal Loli's strength had increased tremendously. Now she could be considered as a great help. With these helpers, Ningfan was quite confident that he could rescue venerated Miao Yan in one go. There's also the Zichou War Division. They can also be a great help to rescue venerated Miao Yan. Ningfan's gaze swept across Teng Nan and Teng Bei. When their eyes met, the two of them immediately smiled. After the desolate world was destroyed, the 6 war divisions under the command of 6 Unity Immortal venerated Miao Yan dispersed. At this moment, There were already 5 war divisions that had contacted 6 Unity Immortal Venerated Miao Yan, and they were heading towards the place where the 6 Unity Immortal Venerated Miao Yan was. However, the Zichou War Division was the only exception. Fan Lianxiu destroyed the Sound Jade tablet they used to communicate with the main forces of the human race. As a result, the Zichou War Division had no idea where the 6 combos Immortal Venerated Miao Yan was at all. Fortunately, Tung Nan and Tung Bei learned from Mounz that Ning Fan's group was currently going to look for Venerated Miao Yan. As for the world where Venerated Miao Yan was at, it seemed like it was not far away from the world of the Gate of Life. There were only a few worlds between them. In their opinion, as long as they travel with Ning Fan's group, they would be able to find Venerated Miao Yan in no time. Hence, under the leadership of Tung Nan and Tung Bei, the entire Zichou War Division directly stayed on Ning Fan's broken continent and followed him. The helpers around Ning Fan increased once again. The group of cultivators only hoped that they could find Venerated Miao Yan easily during this trip. However, they did not know that Venerated Miao Yan was currently trapped in the world of the Gate of Death. Ning Fan had concealed this point and did not mention it. Once he tells them about it, there would probably be many cultivators who were afraid of the dangers of the Gate of Death. They would immediately leave and give up on finding Venerated Miao Yan. Before they arrive at their destination, Ning Fan did not intend to tell the group of cultivators the truth. Let's just say that he was purposely tricking his teammates. With Ning Fan here, Immortal Concubine Zhang Yu naturally did not need to use the piercing golden light anymore. The void-piercing stone fell in front of the group of beasts. The beasts guarded it carefully. As Ning Fan pointed at it from afar, black mist surged out from the void-piercing stone and enveloped the broken continent. Ning Fan then activated the piercing golden light, causing the entire broken continent to immediately shoot out like an arrow that was shot from the bow. Its speed was even faster than before. As it flew at full speed, it was getting closer and closer to the world of the Gate of Death where Venerated Miao Yan was at. Venerated Miao Yan, even though I have never met you before, you have helped me once. Today, I will return the favor. 1 hour passed by. Ning Fan had passed through 4 worlds of the Gate of Life. The further he went, the more Mounz felt like he had been tricked. What entered his sight were pieces of broken continents that were floating in the void. They were in a state of desolation, and there was no sign of any living beings. This was the place where Venerated Miao Yan was at. However, when they arrived at this place, they did not see Venerated Miao Yan. Fellow Taoist Zhao, didn't you say that Venerated Miao Yan is here? Why can't I see him? Could it be that Venerated Miao Yan has already left this place? Mounz's heart was beating rapidly, but his face showed an apologetic smile. There were a lot of people who felt doubtful. However, Ning Fan did not intend to solve their doubts one by one. He drove the broken continent and flew to the front of one of the giant scarlet doors. He activated his rain technique and carefully sensed the interior of the door. With his eyesight, he could tell that it was a gate of death at first glance, but the others could not. When he sensed that the danger inside the door was much lower than what he had expected, he smiled faintly and activated his ability. Then he drove the entire broken continent and flew into the door. This is the world of the Gate of Death. Fellow Taoist Zhao, why did you bring us into the world of the Gate of Death? Senior Zhao, you must have entered the wrong door. Leave this world at once. The world of the Gate of Death. It's actually the world of the Gate of Death. This place is extremely dangerous. We must leave now. Immediately, countless cultivators on the broken continent exclaimed in surprise. Ning Fan's voice spread out in a timely manner. Everyone, please calm down. Look carefully. Venerated Miao Yan is right here. This was Ning Fan's first time entering the world of the Gate of Death. The world of the Gate of Death was not a void. Everywhere that entered his sight was endless sand. There was a huge desert floating in the middle of this world. The sand at the nearest part of the desert was golden in color. If one goes further into the desert, the sand would turn black. If one goes further into the desert, the sand would turn blood red. In this desert, there was a hidden killing formation every few steps. If cultivators below the thought fragmentation realm enter the Gate of Death and trigger the killing formation, they would certainly die. Fortunately, The fearsome formation at the entrance of this world had already been destroyed by venerated Miao Yen. If one does not go deep into this world, there would not be any danger. This was also the reason why Ning Fan dared to drive the broken continent into this world. Ning Fan's eyes turned solemn as he looked at the blood sand region at the center of the desert. Within the blood sand region, he could vaguely see 8 stone towers. The top of each stone tower was pasted with an immortal talisman drawn with a red brush. There was only one word on the talisman: Seal. Each of the 8 stone towers occupied a direction and surrounded the 10,000 li region according to the position of the 8 trigrams. It actually gave off an extremely dangerous feeling. Ning Fan could vaguely see something through the endless sand. In the deepest part of the blood sand region, there was the figure of a lady who was fighting a bitter battle with hundreds of giants. She was venerated Miao Yan. Her enemies were stone giants that were more than 100,000 zhang tall. All of them were formed by the power of formations. She was trapped at the center of the 8 stone towers. If she was at her peak, she would probably be able to break the 8 stone towers and fight her way out. Unfortunately, she could not break out of the encirclement of the 8 stone towers at the moment, unless there was a fellow Taoist whose cultivation base was close to the immortal venerable realm, who was willing to risk his life to help her. Currently, venerated Miao Yan's face was as pale as a piece of paper. Her beautiful face was filled with bitterness. It had been a day since she asked Ning Fan for help. However, Ning Fan did not come to save her in the end. This made her feel a little self-deprecating and disappointed. That fellow Taoist still doesn't plan to save me after all. Could it be that I'm really going to die in this place? Venerated Miao Yan let out a faint sigh. She was already at the end of her rope. She was only holding on with her willpower while waiting for help. At this moment, when she thought that the other party might not come to save her at all, her heart sank again and again. Her willpower also crumbled bit by bit. However, just as she was about to lose all hope, a broken continent suddenly flew into her ears from the distant void. Then, a man's voice came from the broken continent. In an instant, it went into her ears and went into her heart. That voice was obviously cold, but there was a hint of concern for her. After being stunned for a moment, she immediately smiled. She actually felt touched. That mysterious fellow Taoist did not abandon her. He actually came to save her despite the dangers of this place. Most cultivators were selfish. This person's voice was cold and indifferent. Obviously, he was a cold-hearted person. However, he was still willing to save her. Why, who could that person be? Give me 10 breaths of time. I will certainly save you in 10 breaths of time. Chapter 903. 10 breaths was not an arrogant promise that Ning Fan made. Instead, it was a guarantee that he made after some deliberation. He had comprehended the Eastern Sky Ancestor Emperor's secret, power, character, and could see through the flow of the formation. The ferocious formation before them used sand as a formation that was compatible with the earth element. It was divided into 3 formations: blood sand, black muslin, and yellow sand. The yellow sand formation was the weakest, while the blood sand formation was the strongest. The source of the formation's power was the 8 stone pagodas in the blood sand formation. Within the 3-layered array, momentum flowed like the ebb and flow of the tide. Every 10 breaths, the momentum of the array would be at its weakest, and it was also the best time to break the array. The only thing that made Ning Fan fearful was the scarlet word seal on the 8 stone pagodas. That seal seemed to contain a power that came from ancient times. It was as if everything in this world would be sealed by that power. Under the power of the seal, the entrance to the gate of death was gradually sealed. It became a place where one could only enter and not leave. Some cultivators tried to use their divine abilities to fly out of the death gate, but they found that they couldn't. Many old monsters gradually realized that unless they destroyed the formation here, no one would be able to leave. As Ning Fan's voice spread out, many human cultivators spread out their spirit sense and probed into the depths of the fearsome formation. No one could believe that venerable wisdom words was trapped in the death gate. Unfortunately, many human experts recognized venerable Miao Yan's aura and could confirm that the woman trapped in the formation was Miao Yan. What? Venerable wisdom words is actually trapped in this ominous formation. This isn't good, this isn't good. How powerful is this ominous formation that can even trap venerable wise words? It's too difficult for us to destroy this ominous formation. But I've already entered this place. If I don't destroy the ominous formation, I won't be able to leave. I can only brace myself and continue. Speaking of which, if we can destroy this ominous formation, not only can we protect ourselves, but we can also save venerable wise words. It can be considered as a great contribution. The sounds of discussion rose everywhere. As soon as Ning Fan gave the order, the crowd of cultivators instantly fell silent. Now that we're trapped in the realm of the Death Gate, none of us will be able to leave if we don't destroy this ominous formation. If you want to escape from this place, then attack together with me. Destroy the formation and save venerable wisdom words. As soon as Ning Fan gave the order, his voice immediately resounded across the vast sky, reaching the ears of every cultivator on the broken continent. He leaped into the air with the army of 200,000 savage beasts following behind him. They charged toward the fearsome yellow sand formation with an indomitable aura, as though nothing could stop their footsteps. His eyes were filled with burning battle intent. The force of the battle of yin and yang was fully unleashed at this moment, causing all the battle intent between the heavens and earth to form a connection with him. Any cultivator who heard his words would inexplicably feel a surge of courage in their hearts, and it was as if they had received a great encouragement. Their will to fight rose sharply, and when they looked at the dangerous formation again, they actually didn't feel afraid anymore. Ning Fan's words kept echoing in the ears of the cultivators. His voice was like hypnotizing, bewitching, enlightening. Their gazes gradually became blank, but soon after, they revealed unswerving determination and fearless expressions. Be it the cultivators who were in trouble on the Devil Essence Arc, the members of Zichao's combat division, or the cultivators whom Ning Fan had saved previously, none of them could resist the influence of Ning Fan's battle intent as long as their cultivation base was lower than the Shedding Void realm. All of them soared into the sky and followed Ning Fan closely, dashing toward the yellow sand grand formation. We are willing to follow behind Senior Zhao and destroy the fearsome formation to save venerable wisdom words and escape with our lives. If they want to live, they must destroy the fearsome formation together. The shouts of the cultivators resounded through the clouds. Their voices were filled with overwhelming battle intent. Their auras were all indomitable. This was the power of the battle of yin and yang. It could weaken the battle intent of others, and also inspire the hearts of the cultivators, increasing their courage and making their blood boil. Gradually, even some Shedding Void realm old monsters were inspired by Ning Fan, and rushed out to join the formation. As for the four-eyed devil monarch, Fairy Han Wu and the others who were already familiar with Ning Fan, they had already rushed out. The one who rushed at the front was the smiling immortal Loli. The one who rushed at the back was immortal concubine Zhongyu, who was mumbling unwillingly. Even Lu Yen, who had a low cultivation base, also rushed out and followed closely behind Ning Fan. Other than Zhao Dai, and the barbarians of Heaven Barbarian City, who could not fly in the sky, almost all the cultivators flew out after being encouraged by Ning Fan. Mounz, Old Ancestor Jinhua, Tung Nan and Tung Bei looked at each other and sucked in a cold breath. All four of them were Broken Thoughts old monsters. They could vaguely tell that Ning Fan had used some tricks to encourage the cultivators to attack. That kind of trick was too powerful. It involved the Tao law, which was beyond their understanding. The way out has already been sealed. Since things have come to this, there's nothing we can do. Let's also take action. The only way out is to destroy the fearsome formation. Mounz let out a long sigh and flew into the sky together with the other Broken Thoughts old monsters, joining the army of destroying the formation. Inwardly, however, he was feeling nervous. He was the first human Broken Thoughts old monster who met Ning Fan. Along the way, he had been doubting the authenticity of Ning Fan's information. He was afraid that he would be tricked by Ning Fan. Now that he was tricked by Ning Fan into a dead end, he could only complain inwardly. However, there was nothing he could do. He could only brace himself and follow Ning Fan. 1 breath. 2 breaths. 3 breaths. The yellow sand grand formation was already 1,000 zhang away from them. Ning Fan pressed his 5 fingers forward. Immediately, a rainstorm poured down from heaven and earth. Under his control, the rainwater condensed into a giant palm and slammed down on the yellow sand Grand Formation. He was not the only one who attacked. All the wild beasts and cultivators who were close to the yellow sand Grand Formation launched their attacks at the yellow sand Grand Formation. Rays of light of different colors landed on the yellow sand Grand Formation. Immediately, the desert was riddled with thousands of holes. At the fourth breath, it collapsed. The first of the 3 layers of fearsome formations, the yellow sand Grand Formation, was broken. Seeing that the first layer of the fearsome formation was broken, the crowd of cultivators immediately cheered. Their confidence in following Ning Fan to destroy the fearsome formation became stronger. Tens of thousands of divine abilities paved the way. Ning Fan led the army and rushed forward. His eyes were filled with unstoppable faith. On the 5th breath, they were close to the range of the Black Sand Grand Formation. On the 6th breath, hundreds of thousands of divine abilities penetrated through the formation. On the 7th breath, the Black Sand Grand Formation was broken. In front of them, the most powerful Red Sand Grand Formation was finally revealed. 8 strange stone towers that towered into the sky appeared in front of the crowd of cultivators. Even venerated Miao Yen would find it hard to destroy the 8 stone towers from the inside out. However, it was not difficult to destroy them from the outside. The key was to find the right opportunity. At the 8th breath, Ning Fan did not attack. At the 9th breath, Ning Fan summoned the 10 swords of rain and war. At the 10th breath, Ning Fan suddenly dashed out, directly dashing towards the most dilapidated stone tower among the 8 stone towers. That was the 5th stone tower. It had already been damaged by venerated Miao Yan's repeated attacks. At this moment, it was the weakest moment of the Red Sand Grand Formation. At this moment, Ning Fan gave an order. The divine abilities of the crowd of cultivators immediately attacked the stone tower that he was attacking. Tens of thousands of divine abilities converged into a ray of dazzling divine light. Within that ray of divine light, Ning Fan used his 10 swords to open the way. Like a falling meteor, he directly crashed into the 5th stone tower. Venerated Miao Yen, who was fighting against the stone giants, suddenly turned her head and looked at the 5th stone tower. What she saw was the scene of the 5th stone tower collapsing from the outside to the inside under the attacks of tens of thousands of divine abilities. The 8 stone towers were connected to each other. If one of them was destroyed, all of them would be destroyed. Ning Fan only destroyed one of the stone towers, but the other 7 stone towers all collapsed at the same time. The countless stone giants that were attacking venerated Miao Yen also let out a miserable cry and disappeared altogether. The Red Sand Grand Formation was broken. Venerated Miao Yen had broken free. She turned her head to look. At the 10th breath, she saw a silver-haired man with a ghostly face rushing towards her with tens of thousands of divine abilities. That man's eyes were so cold and indifferent. She could not see any trace of emotion in his eyes. It was as if destroying the fearsome formation of the Gate of Death to save her was just a trivial matter that should be taken for granted. Even though it was obviously a cold and emotionless gaze, it caused a ripple in venerated Miao Yan's heart, which had been calm for many years. Venerated Miao Yan stared blankly at Ning Fan, who was rushing towards her. She did not shift her gaze away. When she was at her most desperate moment, this man disregarded the danger and came to save her. Thank you. A bright and beautiful smile suddenly appeared on her pale and weak face. She had been holding on all the way until now. She was already on the verge of exhaustion, and she was only holding on with her willpower. Now that she was out of danger, she already felt a deep sense of fatigue before she could even see clearly who the person who saved her was. Her vision turned black and she directly fainted, falling from the sky. She was very sleepy. She could not open her eyes, she was very tired. She could not muster up any strength at all. In a daze, venerated Miao Yen vaguely felt that she had fallen into the arms of a man. What she smelled was the scent of the man. That scent carried the smell of blood that could not be dispelled. Before he saved her, this man must have been tainted by too many killings. Ning Fan's expression became slightly strange. He caught venerated Miao Yen, who was falling from the sky, and held her in his arms. This woman was obviously covered in blood, but her body was giving off a faint fragrance. That fragrance was a little sweet. It was the fragrance of the green apple grass. Even though Ning Fan was holding a warm and fragrant jade in his arms, he could not bring himself to have any other thoughts. After all, he was holding an immortal venerated Miao Yin whose cultivation base was still intact. She actually fainted. I think she must have exhausted all of her strength to hold on until now. Ning Fan sighed with emotion. If he had come a little later, perhaps venerated Miao Yin would have really died in this ominous formation. Stepping on a ray of light, Ning Fan carried venerated Miao Yin and flew back to the broken continent. This scene made many cultivators who were following Ning Fan widen their eyes. They were speechless. What did they just see? The dignified venerated Miao Yin was actually carried back by Ning Fan. Her head was dizzy and her sea of consciousness was aching faintly. She wanted to open her eyes but she could not. After sleeping for an unknown period of time, venerated Miao Yin suddenly felt a pair of hands moving around her body as if someone was taking off her clothes. She could feel that her clothes were being stripped off one by one. She could feel a chill on her chest. Even her bra was being taken off. Who is it? Who is taking off my clothes? Could it be that fellow Taoist who saved me from danger? Venerated Miao Yin was both embarrassed and angry. She wanted to open her eyes to take a look, but she could not do so. Suddenly, she felt a cold sensation on her body. She heard the sound of water beside her ears. It seemed like someone had put her into the water. Then, she felt a pair of hands moving around her body as if it was helping her to scrub her body. Who is helping me to bathe? Could it be him? Ning Fan's figure that was rushing towards her appeared in venerated Miao Yan's mind. Her face turned even redder. She could feel that the hands were stroking her back, which was as smooth as satin from time to time. At other times, they were stroking her plump and soft chest. She felt an inexplicable sense of irritation and anger towards that person's boldness and frivolity. After an unknown period of time, venerated Miao Yin finally regained a trace of strength and opened her eyes. She saw herself sitting in a wooden basin. The petals of the green apple grass were floating on the surface of the water. Beside her, a pair of delicate and small hands were helping her to scrub her body. It was not Ning Fan's hands but the hands of a woman. Tong Er, why are you the one helping me to scrub my body? I thought it was. Only then did venerated Miao Yin see clearly that the one who had been helping her to bathe was not Ning Fan who was taking advantage of her as she imagined but her maidservant, Tong Er. She heaved a sigh of relief. Inwardly, she thought that her imagination was running wild. Her question had stunned Tong Er. She was venerated Miao Yan's maidservant. Naturally, she should be the one helping venerated Miao Yin bathe. If it's not her, who else could it be? How long have I been unconscious? Venerated Miao Yin spread her spirit sense and asked Tong Er at the same time. In reply to Master, Master has been unconscious for 3 whole days. 3 days. In other words, 4 whole days have passed since the blood sacrifice ceremony. Damn it. I've been unconscious for too long. Venerated Miao Yin frowned and asked Tong Er many more questions such as the whereabouts of the cultivator who had saved her. After a series of questions, venerated Miao Yan's expression gradually changed. Only then did she know that the person who had saved her was called Zhao Jian. Even Tong Er was saved by Zhao Jian. Zhao Jian is it? If it wasn't for this fellow Taoist who saved me, I would most likely be a dead man now. This is a great favor that I can't forget. Venerated Miao Yin muttered to herself. Suddenly, venerated Miao Yan's beautiful eyes widened as if she had sensed something. She casually pulled a bath towel and wrapped it around her body. With a flash, she appeared in front of the window and looked at the sky of Heavenly Man City in disbelief. In the sky, there were actually 2 ancient statues that were approaching her little by little. Those 2 ancient statues had actually locked onto her chi and were searching for her all the way here. 3 days had passed since venerated Miao Yin was rescued. For 3 whole days, venerated Miao Yin was still unconscious. Under Ning Fan's control, the broken continent had already flown out of the gate of death. However, there was no destination for it to move forward. When venerated Miao Yin was unconscious, Ning Fan had also searched through her storage pouch. He automatically ignored the various undergarments in the pouch. He just wanted to find if there was any communication item that could help him contact 6 Unity immortal venerated beings. Unfortunately, Ning Fan did not find what he needed. The broken continent was flying aimlessly in each of the Gate of Life. The people who were controlling the continent were Mounz, Old Ancestor Jin Hua, and the other 2 human cultivators. Of course, the 4 of them did not have the same level of divine ability as the piercing golden light. However, with their combined strength and the power of the space-penetrating stone, they could still make the broken continent fly slowly. Since venerated Miao Yin had yet to wake up, Ning Fan waited bitterly for no result. Thus he went into the profound Yin world 3 days ago, and began to deal with some miscellaneous matters. Naturally, it was to further increase his power to protect himself during the great calamity of the savage wilderness. The first thing he needed to deal with was the inferior innate realm Bao spirit. Secondly, he needed to deal with the massive amount of Joss flames of slaughter. Time returned to 3 days ago. In the profound Yin world, Ning Fan sat in a lotus position in his cave residence in the Western world. 2 longbows were placed in front of him. One of them was a longbow with a dragon horn. It was the form of the candle bow spirit. The other one was a blood-red iron bow. It was the inferior innate realm Bao spirit that Ning Fan had obtained from Fan Lianxiu. At this moment, the blood-red iron Bao was constantly emitting evil qi. It was trying to break free from the seal while locking its killing intent on Ning Fan. As for the longbow with the dragon horn, it was constantly trying to flatter Ning Fan. Its purpose of flattering Ning Fan was none other than to devour the other blood Bao spirit. Master, do you know how much Xiao Gong respects you in his heart? Other than the previous master, Xiao Gong has never respected anyone else. No, compared to you, Little Gong's previous master is practically worthless. Master, please do me a favor and let me devour that innate realm Bao spirit. Master, how can you bear to see me keep begging you and being so lonely? The noisy voice of the candle Bao spirit echoed in Ning Fan's ears. Ning Fan ignored the candle Bao spirit. His eyes moved back and forth between the longbow with a dragon horn and the blood-red longbow. His brows were slightly furrowed from time to time, as if he was struggling to make a decision. There were 5 grades of weapon spirits: mortal grade, immortal grade, acquired grade, inferior innate grade and innate grade. In the 4 heavens and 9 worlds, the weapon spirits of most of the magic treasures in the hands of cultivators were only at the mortal grade. Only a small number of second-step old monsters were qualified to possess an immortal grade weapon spirit. Acquired grade weapon spirits were extremely rare. Usually, only thought fragmentation realm old monsters could possess a acquired grade weapon spirit. A inferior innate weapon spirit was almost as rare as an innate magical treasure. Basically, only immortal emperors were qualified to possess such a high-grade weapon spirit. As for an innate weapon spirit, Ning Fan had only heard about it in ancient books. He had never heard of any powerful cultivators in the 4 heavens who possessed an innate weapon spirit. The rarity of an innate weapon spirit was far beyond that of an innate magical treasure. Not even an immortal emperor was qualified to control a weapon spirit of that level. The 5 sword spirits in Ning Fan's sword pouch were only at the mortal grade when he first met them. Although Ning Fan bestowed them with 5 immortal swords and nurtured them together, gradually raising their grade to the immortal grade, it was still a long time before they could advance to the acquired grade. The difficulty in raising the grade of a weapon spirit could be seen from this. The function of a weapon spirit was to increase the power of a magical treasure. If Ning Fan had a 12 Nirvana Hotian Bao type magical treasure, and added a Subshintian treasure spirit into the Bao, the power of the magical treasure would be able to surpass the limits of the Hotian realm, and compete with a true Xiantian magical treasure. Weapon spirits of the same type could devour each other to increase their grade. The Blood Bao spirit was an inferior innate grade. The Candle Bao spirit was also an inferior innate grade. If the Candle Bao spirit could devour the Blood Bao spirit, even if it couldn't advance to the innate realm in one step, it could still greatly increase its power. Similarly, if the Blood Bao spirit devoured the Candle Bao spirit, it would have the same effect. The thing that Ning Fan couldn't decide was which Bao spirit to keep and devour the other Bao spirit. The Blood Bao spirit was ferocious and uncontrollable. The Candle Bao spirit was noisy and annoying, and often had the intention to betray him. If Ningfan had a third obedient Bao spirit, he would definitely feed the two inferior innate Bao spirits in front of him. Blood Bao. Let me ask you, if I give you a chance to devour this dragon horn Bao, are you willing to submit to me? Ningfan pointed at the blood Bao and slightly unlocked the seal on it. The blood Bao immediately turned into a blood-red youth. The youth's eyes were cold and emotionless. He didn't answer Ningfan's question, and didn't even bother to look at the candle Bao spirit. As soon as he revealed his human form, he immediately revealed a cruel smile, revealing his fangs, and tried to bite Ningfan. Ningfan shook his head and pointed at the youth, causing him to let out a muffled groan and turn back into a Bao. This youth only submitted to Fan Lianxiu alone. He really had a backbone. Unfortunately, he couldn't be used by Ningfan. In that case, there was no room for him to leave. The blood Bao spirit did not respond to Ningfan's words, but the candle Bao spirit did. When the candle Bao spirit heard that Ningfan actually had the intention to keep the blood Bao and sacrifice himself, its body trembled uncontrollably. Half of it was because of anger and the other half was because of fear. Ningfan was actually willing to use it to feed the blood Bao. How could he even think of such a wicked idea? Master, you can't have this idea. Little Bao has been following you for tens of years. How can you feed Little Bao to a Little Bao spirit that has just come to you? You are liking the new and hating the old. Master, at least Little Bao has taught you the reverse spirit technique. Even if it doesn't have any merits, it still has its hard work. Why you? How can you treat me like this? Seeing Ningfan's unmoved expression, the candle Bao spirit's heart was filled with fear. It was thinking of a way to change Ningfan's decision. No matter what, it did not want to be eaten by other Bao spirits. The blood Bao is useless. I can only keep the candle Bao. Ningfan shook his head. He bent his finger and touched the candle Bao, slightly undoing the seal on it. The candle Bao spirit shook its body and immediately turned into an extremely wretched hunchbacked old man. Candle Bao, let me ask you. If I give you the chance to devour the blood Bao, how will you repay me? What benefits can it bring me? As soon as the candle Bao spirit heard this question, the hunchbacked old man immediately knelt on the ground with a thud and cried tears of joy. Ningfan asking this question meant that he still had a chance to live. To him, this was simply great news. And Master, this little one is much more useful than that silly Bao. I can bring you many more benefits. The amount of Joss flames of slaughter that Master kept in the purple gourd is huge. This little one has already sensed it. This little one can help you refine those Joss flames of slaughter into Joss flame arrows. These aren't ordinary Joss flame arrows, but the 7-colored incense flame arrows that my previous master taught me. With the grade of my Bao spirit, the success rate of refining the 6-colored incense flame arrows is almost 100%. It won't be difficult for me to kill an early thought fragmentation realm expert with one arrow. Master, do you know that the success rate of refining the 7-colored incense flame arrows is also 10%? Once the 7-colored incense flame arrows are fired, even an ancient immortal venerable would be severely injured. If Master is willing to let this little one devour the blood Bao, this little one has the confidence to increase the success rate to 20%. At the end, the hunchbacked old man wiped his tears and said disdainfully while pointing at the blood Bao. An ordinary inferior innate Bao spirit like this can at most refine an Joss flame arrow that can kill a void being. It definitely won't be as powerful as this little one. Ningfan's expression changed as he recalled the scene when he fought with Fan Lianxiu. When Fan Lianxiu had the body of an ancient statue, the power of the Joss flame arrows he shot out had the power of an immortal venerable. However, once he lost the body of an ancient statue and lost the power of the ancient statue, the Joss flame arrows would only have the power to kill a void being. What was powerful was not the Joss flame arrows condensed by the blood Bao spirit, but Fan Lianxiu. The power of the 6-colored incense flame arrow that the candle Bao spirit mentioned was already above the blood Bao incense flame arrow. If the candle Bao spirit could really refine the so-called 7-colored incense flame arrow, and severely injure an ancient immortal venerable with one arrow, Ningfan might be tempted by it. However, the authenticity of the candle Bao spirit's words still needed to be verified. First, refine a 6-colored incense flame arrow for me to see. I'll use this arrow to prove whether what you said is true or not. Let's wash up and sleep. Chapter 904. The refinement of the 6-colored incense flame arrow was just a test to see if Candlebao's words were true. Ning Fan bent his palm and summoned the purple gourd to him. He then pointed at it, and the gourd immediately spun and flew towards the old man. The speed of the flight was extremely slow, and as it gradually approached, it gave the old man a feeling of pressure that was as heavy as a mountain. The old man stretched out his hand to catch the gourd, but as soon as he did so, a heavy pressure came from his palm. That kind of heaviness was beyond his ability to bear. With a loud bang, his entire body was crushed and turned into specks of phosphorescent light. The gourd fell on the ground of the cave with a loud bang. The entire mountain began to tremble. The phosphorescent light condensed again, and the old man reappeared. When he looked at the purple gourd again, he was slightly shocked. He naturally knew that the gourd was an innate spiritual item, but he did not expect it to be so heavy. This heaviness came from the innate purple qi in the gourd. The heavier it was, the more powerful the innate purple qi it contained. Master, this gourd of yours is incredible. If it is refined into an innate magical treasure, it probably won't be an ordinary item. This gourd has yet to condense into the shape of a magical treasure. Little Bao, on the other hand, has a way to gradually condense it into the shape of a bao. Gourd bao. If I have such an innate gourd bao, hee, and so on. The old man's eyes darted back and forth. From time to time, he would let out a few wretched laughs. His eyes gradually became fiery. He was sealed by Ning Fan and could not escape. He could not break the seal with his current strength. As time passed, the seal gradually penetrated deep into his spirit body and became deeper. Without external help, he firmly believed that he would not have any hope of breaking the seal in his lifetime. However, if he could nurture an innate realm gourd bao, even if it was only the prototype of a magical treasure, he was quite confident that he could break the seal with the power of the bao. As long as this fiend gives this gourd to me to nurture, I will need at most 1,000 years to nurture this gourd into the shape of a bao. At that time, it won't be difficult for me to break the seal with the power of this bao. I can escape from this fiend's clutches. I must think of a way to get this gourd from this fiend. This is related to this old man's escape plan. Oh gourd, my happiness for the rest of my life depends on you. When he thought of the day when he could regain his freedom, the old man with the candle bow smiled even more wretchedly. His entire face looked like a blooming chrysanthemum. Zhu Gong's words caused Ning Fan's eyes to flicker. He seemed to be tempted. The first step of refining connate magical treasures was to let the materials absorb the power of heaven and earth and the essence of the sun and the moon to develop the prototype of the magical treasure. This step had to be done naturally and could not be assisted by external forces. Otherwise, it would affect the might of the connate treasure. Magical treasures condensed on their own, and the speed was extremely slow. If it was short, it would take 1,000 years. If it was long, it would take more than 1,000,000 years. However, if a higher-grade artifact spirit were to fuse with the refining materials and nurture the spirit item from the inside out, the time needed to condense the item would be greatly reduced. He had never considered what kind of magical treasure he should refine the purple gourd into. The gourd bao seemed to be a good choice. But Ning Fan's eyes narrowed slightly. He glanced at old man Zhu Gong. The latter's little thoughts naturally could not escape his eyes. After pondering for a moment, he said in a deep voice, "We'll talk about the gourd later. Hurry up and refine the 6-colored incense fire arrow." "Hey master, let's talk about this gourd. If you continue to nag, I'll feed you to the blood-devouring bao." "Don't. Please calm down, master. I'll refine the arrow immediately. I'll refine the arrow immediately." Old man Zhu Gong reluctantly looked at the purple gourd on the ground. However, he understood that this was not the time for him to think about this gourd. "Hey, let's refine the arrow first. As long as I can preserve my life, I can slowly plan for the gourd." Old man Zhu Gong raised his hand and pointed at the purple gourd on the ground. The Joss flame of slaughter immediately flew out from the gourd's mouth like smoke. Upon seeing this, Old man Zhu Gong sat down cross-legged and clasped his hands together. All the Joss flame of slaughter surged towards him and slowly condensed into an illusory arrow. In just an instant, the illusory arrow solidified. As Old man Zhu Gong formed a complicated hand seal, the arrow began to change its color. At first, there was only one color. However, the color of the Joss flame arrow continued to increase, turning into 2 colors, 3 colors, 4 colors. Every time the Joss flame arrow gained more color, its power would increase tremendously. In the end, there was a total of 6 colors in the arrow. The stern killing intent emitted from the body of the arrow was enough to make any thought fragmentation true immortal look askance. The moment the Joss flame arrow condensed, Old man Zhu Gong stood up abruptly and quickly let go of the gourd, as if he was afraid of touching the arrow. The Joss flame arrow flew up on its own and slowly hovered in the cave. The arrow intent it emitted made people feel suffocated. Indistinctly, the roar of an ancient dragon could be heard from the arrow. It carried an extremely vicissitudes of life. Master, please take a look. The 6-colored Joss flame arrow has been refined. Old man Zhu Gong said to Ning Fan carefully with a smile. The quality of this 6-colored Joss flame arrow was average. It was neither high nor low. Even if he performed normally, he was not sure if Ning Fan would be satisfied with it. The time it took to refine this arrow was extremely short. However, it consumed 1/10 of the power of the old man Zhu Gong's bow spirit. He needed time to recover. A 6-colored Joss flame arrow had consumed 1% of the Joss flame of slaughter in the gourd. Judging from the huge amount of Joss flame, the consumption was not small. Ning Fan's eyes flickered as he glanced at the arrow. With a wave of his palm, the 6-colored Joss flame arrow stopped hovering and slowly descended into Ning Fan's palm. As soon as he grasped it, the body of the arrow ignited with a dazzling 6-colored flame. Suddenly, an illusion appeared in front of Ning Fan's eyes. It was as if there were billions and trillions of barbarians kowtowing to him with tears of blood in their eyes. They worshipped him unwaveringly for tens of thousands of years. The aura of the Joss flame of slaughter was too strong. The illusion disappeared in a flash. Ning Fan's mind was quickly awakened by the scorching heat in his palm. The Joss flame arrow in his palm was terrifyingly hot. It was as if everything that came into contact with this arrow would burn. A powerful force came out from the arrow and shook Ning Fan's palm open. It flew out of Ning Fan's hand and flew up again. Ning Fan's body swayed as he was shaken by the huge force. He took 10 steps back in the cave. His eyes turned solemn. When he opened his palm was scorched and emitted a foul stench. I can't even hold this arrow with my intermediate truth crossing realm cultivation base. Ning Fan's eyes widened. Seeing that Ning Fan dared to hold the arrow with his bare hands, the Candlebow old man was slightly startled. Then he shook his head and sneered. The 6-colored Joss flame arrow's slaughter chi was too strong. Even a thought-breaking old monster would be burned by the Joss flame of slaughter if he touched this arrow. Even he, the bow spirit who refined this arrow, didn't dare to touch it. This arrow was extremely powerful. It could kill an early thought-breaking realm expert in one shot. However, one needed to be qualified to control this arrow. Not everyone had the qualifications to control this extremely special Joss flame arrow. In the Candlebow old man's eyes, only his first master, ancestral dragon Zhu Li, had the qualifications. Master, are you alright? What? You were burned by the Joss flame arrow? I saw it with my own eyes and my heart ached. Damn it. Little Bao really deserves to die. I forgot to remind Master that this arrow can't be touched casually. With Master's intermediate truth crossing realm cultivation base, only by taking a pill that can resist the slaughter chi can you touch this arrow. Little Bao old man's previous master said that one needs to be qualified to control this arrow. The Candlebow old man's face was full of worry, as if he was extremely concerned about Ning Fan. However, in his heart he was gloating. Naturally, he was gloating because Ning Fan overestimated his own strength. He tried to use his intermediate truth-crossing realm cultivation base to hold the arrow with his bare hands. In the end, he brought disgrace upon himself and got burned by the arrow. This fiend is really overestimating himself. His cultivation base is only at the middle stage of Dujin stage, but it is like holding the 6-colored incense arrow. Even the former master only dared to hold the arrow with his hand after he cultivated to the 10,000 ancient immortal venerable realm. The previous master said that in order to control this arrow, cultivation base alone isn't enough. He also needs a trace of enlightenment. It seems that only after understanding something would one have the qualifications to completely control this arrow. Otherwise, even if he borrowed the power of the pill to forcibly control this arrow, he would only be able to unleash a small portion of the arrow's power. What a pity! This malefic star doesn't seem to have this qualification. While the candlebow old man was gloating, Ning Fan was thinking about the word qualification in his words. Is there still a need for qualification to control this arrow? Ning Fan activated the star art. The burn on his palm was immediately healed under the starlight. The ghost face faintly revealed a sense of excitement. Baleful qi gradually surged out from his body. Ning Fan raised his hand again and grabbed the Joss flame arrow that was hovering above him. The arrow was directly pulled into his hand. As soon as the arrow entered his hand, it emitted a huge force, trying to break free from Ning Fan's palm. The huge force caused Ning Fan to take a few steps back before he stabilized his body. His eyes were filled with determination. He would never let go of the arrow. This time, he retreated 9 steps in a row. With each step, he left an inch-deep footprint on the stone floor of the Immortal's cave. His chi was slightly messy, but this time, the arrow didn't break free from his palm. His hand wasn't burned at all. Hiss! This malefic star actually used his Duzhen cultivation to hold the 6-colored Joss flame arrow without any injuries. The candlebow old man's heart pounded in disbelief. Even his former master couldn't hold the 6-colored Joss flame arrow without any external force before his cultivation base reached the eternal immortal venerable realm. However, Ning Fan was able to do it. However, it seemed different from when his master was controlling the arrow. Could it be that this malefic star is also qualified to control the arrow like my former master? My former master relied on the power of the Tao law of arrow to control the arrow. Could it be that this malefic star also has some understanding of the Tao law of arrow? But that can't be right. My former master said that if he had some understanding of the Tao law of arrow, he wouldn't be repelled by the arrow and wouldn't retreat. With his eyesight, he couldn't see that Ning Fan was using the power of the innate ghost face to forcefully suppress the power of the Joss flame arrow. Therefore, he was puzzled by Ning Fan's action of taking 9 steps back after receiving the Joss flame arrow without any injuries. Ning Fan looked at the 6-colored Joss flame arrow in his palm. His eyes were filled with seriousness and a trace of confusion. 9 steps. I have clearly used the power of the innate ghost face to suppress the power of the Joss flame arrow. But I was still repelled 9 steps. The reason why I was repelled wasn't because I didn't have enough strength, but because the arrow is rejecting me. The reason why it rejected me seems to be related to the Tao law. If I can't truly subdue this arrow, the power of the arrow will be greatly weakened. Ning Fan remained silent for a moment. He withdrew the power of the ghost face that was suppressing the 6-colored Joss flame arrow. Instantly, he felt a burning sensation on his palm. He had no choice but to let go of the arrow, allowing it to fly again. The power of this arrow was indeed not weak. He had personally experienced the power of this arrow. It shouldn't be a lie that this arrow could kill an early thought fragmentation cultivator with a single shot. This arrow was extraordinary. Moreover, it was only a 6-colored Joss flame arrow. If it was a 7-colored Joss flame arrow, how powerful would it be? It shouldn't be a lie that this arrow could severely injure an ordinary eternal immortal venerable with a single shot. However, Ning Fan had also personally felt that the power of this arrow could only be used to kill a specific target. This arrow was condensed from the Joss flame of massacre. The Joss flame of massacre originated from the hatred of countless dead barbarians. The target of their hatred wasn't only Fan Lianxiu, but also all the enemies who intended to harm the barbarians. This kind of hatred was the hatred of the extermination of the barbarians. It was also a deep attachment to the barbarians. Therefore, the scope of their hatred was wider. From this Joss flame arrow, Ning Fan could feel a will. Anyone who goes against the barbarians, no matter who they are, is the enemy of this arrow. Those who weren't the enemy of the barbarians wouldn't suffer too much damage even if they were hit by this arrow. This was the limitation of the Joss flame of massacre. Unless it was a cultivator who cultivated the Tao of hatred, no one would be able to ignore this limitation and use this arrow to kill innocent people. Now that the desolate land was in a great calamity, the barbarians had a lot of enemies. There were demon cultivators, savage beasts and ancient statues of their ancestors. All of them were slaughtering the barbarians unscrupulously. Therefore, in the desolate land, this arrow could be used to kill savage beasts, demon cultivators, and even the barbarian ancestors of the past. Although it had its limitations, it was still very useful. Candlebow, your 6-colored arrow is very useful. I will let you devour the blood bow. After you devour the blood bow, you can then refine the 7-colored arrow. I want to comprehend this arrow here. Before you devour the blood bow, don't disturb me. After handing the blood bow spirit to Candlebow, Ning Fan sat cross-legged in the cave dwelling and closed his eyes to meditate. What he was meditating on was naturally the qualification to control the arrow. Seeing that Ning Fan had entered the state of comprehension, Candlebow naturally didn't dare to disturb him. The current him was already overjoyed when he heard Ning Fan asking him to devour the blood bow. He only wanted to devour the blood bow as soon as possible, and was not interested in Ning Fan's matters at all. He chuckled and walked towards Ning Fan step by step. He picked up the blood bow and revealed an extremely wretched expression. He stuck out his tongue and licked the body of the blood bow, as if he was enjoying it very much. Every time he licked it, the spiritual energy of the blood bow would decrease a little and flow into his body. He did not dare to make too loud a sound as he was afraid that Ning Fan would scold him. The process was too beautiful. Fortunately, Ning Fan closed his eyes to meditate and did not look at it. Otherwise, he would probably be disgusted. The devouring process lasted for nearly 3 days. After the devouring was completed, the chi of Candlebow had increased by a lot. The grade of the bow spirit had obviously improved. Even though there was still a huge gap between it and the innate realm, its grade was already close to the peak of the innate realm. Feeling that the grade of its bow spirit had greatly improved, Candlebow was so happy that it could not close its mouth. As for the blood bow, it had already been devoured by Candlebow until not even its bones were left. During the 3 days when Candlebow devoured the blood bow, Ning Fan had been sitting in the cave dwelling with his eyes closed. During these 3 days, Ning Fan did not move at all. He had been meditating on something with his eyes closed. On the first day, his body was flowing with the power of intent realm. What he was comprehending was the arrow intent. Intent realm was the embryonic form of the great Tao. It was the power that a first-step cultivator would comprehend in their lifetime. With Ning Fan's mid-true crossing realm cultivation base, it was not difficult for him to comprehend the arrow intent realm. As time went by, the power of the arrow intent continued to increase. When the second day arrived, the power of the arrow intent had completely turned into the power of the Tao of arrow. On the second day, Ning Fan was comprehending the Tao of arrow. The Tao of arrow in Ning Fan's eyes was to never turn back once the bow is drawn. The word arrow referred to moving forward with an indomitable will and having no regrets once the bow is drawn. Ning Fan's Tao was about persistence. The Tao of arrow also had some traces of Tao persistence. Therefore, it was not difficult for him to comprehend it. It was Ning Fan's first time calming himself down to comprehend the Tao of arrow. It was also the first time he felt that his personality and the Tao of arrow were so compatible. On the third day, the power of the Tao of arrow was still flowing in his body. However, within that power, there was gradually something that he could not explain. His entire body seemed to have turned into an arrow that would never turn back once the bow is drawn. The laws of the Tao of arrow constantly converged in his surroundings. Those were the laws of the Tao of arrow that existed between heaven and earth. He could sense them, but he could not control them. The current me still doesn't have the qualifications to command the arrows. However, there will be a day. On the third day, Ning Fan opened his eyes and stood up. He reached out to grab the 6-colored arrow again. This time, he only took 6 steps back. He did not say anything else. He kept the 6-colored arrow and his eyes swept across Candlebow at the side. Seeing that Candlebow had successfully devoured the blood bow, and its grade had greatly improved, He ordered it to forge the 7-colored arrow. Don't worry, master. Little Bao has already devoured the blood Bao, and its strength has improved tremendously. The success rate of forging the 7-colored arrow is at least 20%. Master still has so much Joss flames of slaughter. Little Bao can forge at least 5 7-colored arrows. After I forge the 7-colored arrows, can master give that gourd? Candle Bao looked at the purple gourd with a covetous gaze. It licked its lips and was still thinking about the gourd. We'll talk about the gourd after you forge the 7-colored arrow. Hurry up and forge the arrow. Ning Fan's eyes darkened. Candle Bao immediately shut its mouth and began to forge the 7-colored arrow eagerly. His expression was extremely conceited, as if it was a piece of cake for him to forge the 7-colored arrow. Soon, however, Candle Bao could no longer feel happy. Forging the 7-colored arrow was to forge one more color on the basis of the 6-colored arrow. Before devouring the blood Bao, the success rate of forging the 7-colored arrow was about 10%. After devouring the blood Bao, the success rate had increased to 20%. According to the success rate, 20% meant that 1 out of 5 arrows would succeed. The grade of the arrows that failed would stop at the 6-colored grade. Unfortunately, Candle Bao's luck seemed to be bad today. He failed 9 arrows in a row and barely managed to forge the first 7-colored arrow. After that, he failed another 6 times and only managed to forge the second 7-colored arrow. After that, he failed another 8 times and barely managed to forge the third arrow. Before he could forge the fourth arrow, the Joss flames of slaughter in the gourd had already been used up. Is this the 20% success rate that you mentioned? Didn't you say that you can forge at least 5 7-colored arrows? Ning Fan's cold eyes swept across Candle Bao. Immediately, Candle Bao was drenched in cold sweat. He kept explaining the reason for his bad luck today. Ning Fan just let out a cold snort and did not comment on his explanation. As a matter of fact, with Ning Fan's experience, he could clearly see that the reason why Candle Bao failed so much today was because of his mentality. This fellow's temperament was really too bad. After devouring the blood Bao, his grade rose tremendously and he became complacent. That was why he made so many mistakes during the forging process. To put it bluntly, this fellow deserved to be scolded. He could not be praised or allowed to be complacent. Ning Fan turned his head and looked at the tens of incense arrows that were hovering in the cave. From the beginning to the end, Candle Bao had forged a total of 24 6-colored arrows and 3 7-colored arrows. The power of the 6-colored arrow could kill an early thought fragmentation realm expert with a single arrow. In the current desolate world, the power that forbids immortals was rampant. Perhaps no one below the immortal venerable realm could withstand the destructive power of a 6-colored arrow. The power of the 7-colored arrow could severely injure an ancient immortal venerable. With 3 7-colored arrows in hand, even if he encounters old ancestor poisonous dragon or the ancient statue of a certain barbaric ancestor, Ning Fan would not be afraid. With these arrows, Ning Fan finally had the power to protect himself in the desolate world. Looking at the Joss flame arrows, Ning Fan felt like he could see the barbarians kowtowing to him, begging him to take revenge for them. The targets of their revenge were, of course, the murderers who caused them to end up like this. These arrows will eventually come in handy. With a wave of his hand, Ning Fan sealed all the Joss flame arrows and kept them in his storage pouch. Seeing that Ning Fan did not blame him for his failure, Candle Bao felt relieved. Then he began to plan for Ning Fan's innate gourd. Master, do you need my help to nourish that gourd of yours? If you do, I'm willing to do my best to help you. Master, look at this gourd. No matter how I look at it, it looks like a good seed for forging bows. It's really a waste of God's gift if you don't let me nourish it. Master, please give me a chance to repay you. Let me help you nourish this gourd. Old man Candle Bao pleaded bitterly just to get Ning Fan's purple gourd to give him a chance to break the seal. Just as Ning Fan was about to say something, his eyes suddenly turned grim as if he had sensed something. The rain intent in his eyes flashed. His gaze seemed to have directly penetrated the profound world, and saw what was happening outside the world. You want the gourd? Sure. I'll give you a chance to perform. Kill all the enemies who come to invade us. What's the harm in lending this gourd to you? Ning Fan pointed at Candle Bao with his index finger. Candle Bao's body trembled and immediately turned back into the form of a dragon-horned longbow. Leaving the gourd in the immortal's cave, Ning Fan held the longbow and stepped out of the profound Yin world. Even though he was separated by the profound Yin world, he could still sense two traces of killing intent rushing towards him from the outside world. Those two traces of killing intent originated from two ancient statues. The statue of the third-generation barbaric ancestor, Fan Jia. The statue of the fifth-generation barbaric ancestor, Fan Xianding. The chi of that female venerated immortal is on this broken continent. Finally, I found her. In the void, the two ancient giants stepped on the void and headed towards the broken continent. When Mounz and the others who were controlling the flying continent saw the two giants approaching them with monstrous auras, they were all shocked. If they were not mistaken, the two ancient statues that were approaching them were extremely similar to the ancient statues of the sixth-generation barbaric ancestor that they encountered a few days ago. Let's wash up and go to sleep. Chapter 905. Two ancient statue giants stepped on the void and approached the shattered continent. One of them was the statue of the third-generation barbarian ancestor, while the other was the statue of the fifth-generation barbarian ancestor. Their auras were as vast as the ancient immortal venerables. The statue of the third-generation barbarian ancestor had a bloodthirsty expression on its face. Tens of thousands of blood banners were circling around its body. The cries of a young girl could be heard coming from the banners. Those blood banners were his divine abilities. The statue of the fifth-generation barbarian ancestor's eyes were empty and cold. Every time it took a step, a burning footprint would appear in the void. Its Tao was fire. The aura of the female immortal venerables is on this broken continent. Finally, we found her. The statue of the third-generation barbarian ancestor smiled cruelly. It had been 2 days since he and the fifth-generation barbarian ancestor chased after Venerable's wise words. This girl is full of primordial Yin. The blood of her primordial Yin is like a holy healing item to us. Fifth-generation barbarian ancestor, please help me. I can fight alone in this battle. It won't be difficult for me to take down this girl. The third-generation barbarian ancestor stomped on the void. His stone body immediately let out a loud rumbling sound and shrunk bit by bit. His stone body was originally as large as the sky, but now, it had returned to the size of a normal person. However, his body was still made of stone, and was glowing with an evil blood-red light. There were still 2 heads, one crying and the other laughing. Seeing this, the fifth-generation barbarian ancestor also turned smaller. He squinted his eyes and looked at the third-generation barbarian ancestor. Do you really not need my help? It's not a good thing to underestimate the enemy. You know that I'm an expert in the art of tracking. I have a feeling that the statue of the sixth-generation barbarian ancestor has been destroyed by someone. Even his blood soul has been destroyed. I don't know why, but I can sense the aura of death left by the sixth-generation barbarian ancestor on this broken continent. Perhaps the sixth-generation barbarian ancestor's blood soul has been destroyed by someone on this broken continent. What did you say? You sense that Fan Lianxiu's blood soul has been destroyed? Hearing this, the third-generation barbarian ancestor was shocked. Fifth forefather, oh fifth forefather, you must have sensed wrongly. If you say that Fan Lianxiu's ancient statue body was destroyed, this old man would still believe it. After all, any slightly more powerful immortal venerable would have a way to destroy my ancient statue body. However, the blood soul in the ancient statue could not be killed by anyone. There are only a handful of powers that can harm us blood souls. In the current wildlands, the strongest cultivators are only some immortal venerables. Their cultivation is limited, so it's impossible for them to harm us blood souls. Don't worry. Just stay at the side and help me. No one on this broken continent is a match for me. Although that human race female venerable is an immortal venerable, she is still a woman. I have many ways to deal with women. The third patriarch grinned and took a step forward, disappearing from where he stood. He was still extremely far away from the shattered continent, but with this one step, he instantly appeared in front of it. The third ancestor pointed her finger forward. and the 10,000 blood banners circling around her immediately whistled out. They all flew up and began to sway in the void. Red sand suddenly appeared in the void. As the red sand spread out, it condensed into a giant, withered hand that pushed at the shattered continent. The force of the push extinguished all the light emitting from the shattered continent, causing it to stop floating in the void. At the same time, an extremely evil murderous intent spread out from the third patriarch's body and pressed down on the shattered continent. I am the third-generation barbarian ancestor, Fan Ku. Today, all the living beings on this broken continent will become my food. No one can escape. The voice was as powerful as a primordial celestial venerable. It was as cold as the call of the dead from hell, causing the people on the shattered continent to exclaim. No one expected to encounter an enemy with the strength of a primordial celestial venerable here. A moment later, the crowd was even more astonished. This was because they realized that it was not one primordial celestial venerable that attacked them, but two. After the third progenitor appeared, the fifth progenitor also appeared. His aura was shocking. He had reached the primordial celestial venerable level. The enemies are primordial celestial venerables, and there are two of them, some cultivators exclaimed. The third progenitor, Fan Ku, and the fifth progenitor, Fan Xianding. There's no mistake. Both of them are the ancestors of the barbarian race, just like the sixth progenitor. Many barbarians exclaimed. It was their ancestors who had descended, but there was no joy or belief in the barbarians' eyes. There was only fear, anger, unwillingness, and confusion. The third progenitor's words were very clear. The barbarians here were only food for the third progenitor. That was all. Food. What a sorrowful term. The barbarians were only food in the eyes of the barbarian ancestors. Fortunately, they had already been disappointed once. Although there was still sorrow in their hearts when they heard the same words, the sorrow had faded away. Now they had a new belief. Compared to the barbarian ancestors, they were more willing to believe in a foreign cultivator named Zhao Jian. Interesting. This is extremely interesting. There are human cultivators, savage beasts, and barbarians here. What kind of combination is this? What puzzles me the most is that the barbarians are looking at me with no respect at all. The savage beasts are also looking at me with murderous intent. Hee hee, what a rude gaze. You barbarians, why aren't you kneeling when you see me? Kneel for me. The third progenitor retracted her smile and snorted coldly. A pressure that came from her bloodline immediately pressed down on the entire broken continent. The human cultivators couldn't feel the pressure, but as savage beasts and barbarians, they had to submit under the pressure of the bloodline. The blood of the 200,000 savage beasts was boiling. Under the pressure of the third progenitor's bloodline, all of them began to tremble and prostrate on the ground. The millions of barbarians immediately knelt on the ground when they were suppressed by the pressure of the bloodline. The faces of these barbarians were filled with unwillingness. They were unwilling to kneel. With the collapse of their belief, they would rather die than kneel to the third progenitor. However, kneeling or not kneeling was not up to them. Under the pressure of the third progenitor's bloodline, none of the barbarians dared to defy her, even if they were unwilling. Why must we kneel to such an ancestor? I'm not willing. I'm not willing. Zhao Dai, tried her best to straighten her knees, unwilling to kneel. She bit her lips until blood trickled down. She was unwilling. She would rather die than kneel to an evil ancestor who treated the barbarians like dogs. However, under the pressure, a weak person like her was like a withered leaf in the wind. She wobbled, and was about to kneel on the ground. Suddenly, Immortal Loli stretched out her small hand and patted Zhao Dai's back. With that pat, a cool lightning force immediately flowed into Zhao Dai's body, dispersing the pressure on her body. Zhao Dai heaved a sigh of relief and thanked Immortal Loli. Thank you, Xian Xian. Hee hee, no need to be so polite. Immortal Loli smiled and took a bite of the lightning pill. Then, she raised her head and looked at the third progenitor and the fifth progenitor. She only lost her memory, but she wasn't a fool. How could she not see that the two barbarian ancestors were great enemies? She didn't understand what the barbarian ancestors meant, but she could see that the two barbarian ancestors were extremely similar to Fan Lianxiu. Humph, the bodies of these two old men are made of stone. Inside the stone, there's a blood soul. Just like that old man blood soul. I can fight one of these old men, but I might not be able to defeat two of them. Should I call Daddy for help? No, no, no. Daddy is in seclusion now. I can't disturb him. Forget it, I'll fight two of them alone. Immortal Lowly was about to make a move when she suddenly exclaimed softly. At the same time, Immortal Concubine Zhongyu, Earth Demon and Iron Crow Taoist also raised their heads and looked at an empty void. At that place, an enchanting female cultivator in a pink dress appeared slowly. Her pretty face was covered in frost. It was Venerable Miao Yan. Other than the four of them, no one else knew how Venerable Miao Yan appeared. Venerable Miao Yan was originally watching the scene outside through the window, but now, she had no choice but to make a move. She had been unconscious for 3 days, and only woke up when she was taking a bath. Not long after she woke up, she sensed two ancient statues approaching from afar. If Venerable Miao Yan's senses weren't wrong, the reason why the two of them came here was to track down her aura. These two are the ancient statues. With just a glance, she recognized the third and fifth ancestors. They were the ancient statues summoned by Patriarch Poisonous Dragon. She learned many things from the servant girl Tong. She knew that there was an ancient statue of the sixth barbaric ancestor on this broken continent. With her wisdom and experience of guarding the wildlands for many years, she immediately understood what was going on when she heard the third ancestor's name. What Patriarch Poisonous Dragon summoned back then was probably all the ancient statues of the seventh barbaric ancestor in the history of the barbarians. The rotation of the ancient statues was an indispensable part of the blood sacrifice in the wildlands. If they could destroy the ancient statues, they could slightly hinder the demon's plan. Fellow Taoist Zhao Jian and his daughter have already destroyed the sixth ancestor's ancient statue. The two statues in front of us are the third ancestor and the fifth ancestor. My injuries are very serious. Although I've recovered some of my strength during the 3 days I was unconscious, it's still far from enough to fight against an immortal venerable ancient statue, let alone two of them. When I fought against Du Longzi in the past, I suffered a crushing defeat in the hands of that ancient statue. That ancient statue was much stronger than the two statues in front of us. It's very difficult for me to fight against the two of them now. Should I ask for fellow Taoist Zhao Jian's help? Venerated Miao Yan had already scanned the broken continent with her spirit sense for more than 10 times. However, she could not find Ning Fan at all. According to Tong, Ning Fan seemed to be in seclusion at this moment. She walked gracefully. Every time she stepped on the void, a ray of purple starlight would be embellished in the void. Her brows were tightly knitted together as she walked towards the third and fifth ancestors. The two of them had come for her. She was destined to not be able to stay out of today's matter. Also, she had never planned to stay out of it. Third ancestor Fan Jia, fifth ancestor Fan Xianding. I'm very curious about why the barbarian ancestors who had died in the ancient times were resurrected. What I'm more curious about is why the barbarian race has always been at odds with the foreign races. Why are you helping the demons to sacrifice the wildlands? Can the two of you answer my doubts? The fifth ancestor only smiled coldly in response to venerated Miao Yan's question. He did not intend to answer her. The third ancestor's eyes, on the other hand, were filled with evil intent. He scanned venerated Miao Yan's body again and again. His gaze lingered on her voluptuous body, and he licked his lips greedily. He was originally a cultivator of the Black Evil tribe. When he was still a barbarian ancestor, he would ask the barbarian tribes to offer countless young girls to him every year. Ever since he fell, he had not touched a woman for many years. Venerated Miao Yan, who was standing before him, was undoubtedly a peerless beauty. Just a glance at him was enough to make his heart itch. Venerated Miao Yan's primordial yin was even more abundant. To him, she was the best human cauldron. He wished that he could immediately take her down, press her under his body and ravage her mercilessly. He wanted to enjoy the sight of her crying under his body. Not bad. Not bad at all. Hehe. What a great venerated immortal human cauldron. This cauldron is mine. Barbarian art, barbarian voice of 6 desires. The third ancestor's figure flashed, and he directly dashed towards venerated Miao Yan. He raised his finger and pointed at the 10,000 blood flags in the void. Immediately, the enchanting and seductive voices of countless young girls came from those blood flags. The voice was invisible, but it instantly enveloped venerated Miao Yan. Venerated Miao Yan saw the third ancestor rushing towards her, and was about to resist. However, the devilish voice suddenly entered her ears. Her pretty face immediately turned abnormally red and her blood flowed in the opposite direction. For a moment, the flow of magic power in her body slowed down by more than 30%. She could not help but reveal a shocked and angry expression. The third ancestor actually used a sound enchantment technique on her. She was already seriously injured, and now that she was struck by the enchantment technique, it was even more disadvantageous for her to fight against the third ancestor. She reluctantly raised her finger and bid it to draw in the void, drawing lines of purple starlight. The starlight intertwined and formed a formation. Suddenly, a purple soft sword shot out from the formation and slashed towards the third ancestor like a soft snake. The power of this sword is not enough to injure me at all. The third ancestor sneered slightly. His forward momentum did not slow down. He opened his mouth and spat out a lightning bolt that directly broke the soft sword. Immediately his expression changed slightly. After the soft sword was broken, its power did not decrease but increased instead. It split into two and slashed towards his left and right. He had to stop his forward momentum and focus on dealing with the two swords. He thought that the sword seemed to have the ability to split and multiply. If that was the case, he could not casually destroy the sword. Barbarian technique, barbarian fish swallows the sea. The third ancestor's hand seal changed and a giant barbarian fish shadow immediately appeared between heaven and earth. It directly swallowed the two sword shadows into its stomach. This technique was a secret technique passed down by the barbarian tribe since ancient times. As long as one's cultivation level was high enough, this technique could swallow everything in the world. The two sword shadows were swallowed by the barbarian fish, and immediately disappeared along with the gradually dimming fish shadows, without the slightest trace of power. Seeing this, venerated Miao Yan once again bit her finger, and pointed in the void 72 times at lightning speed. In the void, 72 ancient stone pillars immediately rose. They formed an array with each other, and trapped the third ancestor in the array. As soon as the third ancestor was trapped, the 72 stone pillars immediately lit up with countless runes and emitted an extremely ferocious killing intent. The fifth ancestor's expression changed slightly. He wanted to help the third ancestor break the array, but was stopped by the third ancestor. It's just a small array, I can break it with a raise of my hand. Fifth ancestor, don't even think about doing anything. My name is Fanxia. The word xia is the root of my divine power. You can't stop me. Abolish the 100 schools of thought, and respect the barbarian technique alone. The third ancestor put his palms together, and a giant scarlet shadow appeared behind him. The giant shadow suddenly raised its hand and pointed a finger at the 72 stone pillars. With just one finger, the 72 stone pillars turned into ashes in an instant. Then it pointed at venerated Miao Yan. Venerated Miao Yan's primordial spirit immediately felt a sharp pain, and showed signs of collapsing. This finger could destroy all divine powers apart from the barbarian technique, and kill all non-barbarian cultivators. Hee, this move of yours is too powerful. This sister has yet to recover from her injuries, and can't take this move. Let's switch. With a flash of lightning, Immortal Loli instantly appeared in front of venerated Miao Yan. She pressed her small hand forward, and an incomparably huge silver lightning diagram appeared in front of her. In the lightning diagram, the lightning chariot that was close to level 10 slowly appeared and fired a cannon. The chilling power of dark thunder immediately made the third ancestor's heart shudder. The divine power of the giant scarlet shadow's finger was directly destroyed by the lightning chariot's thunder cannon. The thunder cannon did not lose its momentum and directly attacked the third ancestor. Not good. Fifth ancestor, help me resist this cannon. The third ancestor was shocked. He flew back and shouted coldly. The fifth ancestor was also shocked. The thunder cannon's attack gave him an extremely dangerous feeling. It was as if even their ancient statue bodies that were comparable to venerated immortals couldn't take this cannon. There was no need for the third ancestor to ask for help. He had already planned to help from the side. The fifth ancestor pointed his index finger forward and suddenly, a flame giant appeared in front of him and knelt down in front of the thunder cannon. This was the divine power that the fifth ancestor was most proficient in, the fire worship technique. As he kowtowed, a giant flame palm appeared in front of the thunder cannon and directly grabbed at the cannon. The third ancestor who was retreating saw the fifth ancestor's attack and no longer retreated. He controlled the tens of thousands of blood banners and turned them into one banner. With the banner in his hand, the third ancestor's aura changed. He waved the banner, and the rolling red sand immediately rolled towards the cannon. Under the bombardment of the three divine powers, the world there cracked from the middle and showed signs of collapsing. The result of the collision was that the thunder cannon did not gain any advantage, and neither of the two barbaric ancestors gained any advantage. What a powerful lightning chariot! This little girl is quite amazing. The third ancestor and the fifth ancestor glanced at Immortal Loli and were secretly shocked. Venerated Miao Yin smiled gratefully at Immortal Loli. She had already heard about Immortal Loli's formidable battle achievements from Tong Air. Thus she was not too surprised. However, she was very curious about Immortal Loli's identity. She was actually able to display the secret chariot technique of the Extreme Lightning Palace to a level that was close to the 10th grade. Immortal Loli was Ning Fan's daughter. What was Ning Fan's background? As expected, it's very difficult for me to gain any advantage when these two old men join hands. Immortal Loli's small face was slightly pale. To her, using the lightning chariot that was close to the 10th grade was still a huge burden. The consumption of the cannon was not small. It would be fine if she could kill an ancient statue in one shot. However, it was too disadvantageous for her to not gain any advantage from the cannon. Even though this little girl's lightning chariot is powerful, it seems to be a little difficult for her to activate it. Her pale face is the proof. I don't think she can use such a powerful lightning chariot for too many times. The fifth ancestor noticed Immortal Loli's expression and sneered. That's right. She's just a little girl. There's nothing to be afraid of. The third ancestor calmed herself down and chuckled. This little girl's skin is very beautiful. Even though her bones have yet to grow, if I pluck her, perhaps, it'll be a different kind of taste. This cauldron is very good. Let's take it as well. Barbarian technique, slave technique. The third ancestor suddenly raised the blood banner in her hand to the sky. As the banner swayed, the stone statue of a barbarian girl immediately appeared in the void. The girl on the stone statue was completely naked. Her expression was charming and her eyes had a magical power that could captivate one's soul. In the beginning, there was only one stone statue. Then the second, the third. In just a few breaths' time, millions of stone statues of young girls had appeared in the sky. At this moment, all the women, be they cultivators or barbarians, had their bodies petrified. This technique seemed to be able to turn any woman whose cultivation base was lower than the third ancestor into a stone statue, and become her own slave. This technique was specially used to restrain the female cultivators in the world. Not good. Venerable Miao Yan's beautiful face was filled with shock. She realized that the moment the stone statues of young girls appeared, her body stiffened and she couldn't move. The area below her ankles had been petrified and the petrification was spreading upwards bit by bit. She couldn't move or resist it. Immortal Loli's face was also filled with shock. Her body also began to petrify. She couldn't resist the petrification even though she was a woman. Fairy Cold Dance, Zhao Dai, Luyan, Tong Air. Each of the women showed signs of petrification. Even immortal concubine Zhang Yu was petrified bit by bit. She wanted to cry but no tears came out. She wanted to cry but no tears came out. She really wanted to ask the heavens what kind of sin she had committed. Ever since she followed Ning Fan, she had never had a moment of peace. Wherever she went, there would be countless dangers. She even encountered such an evil slave technique. The slave technique was definitely a famous bewitching technique in ancient times. Other than an expert in bewitching techniques like Great Emperor Ancient Chaos, Perhaps no one could create a bewitching technique that was more powerful than this technique. The third ancestor's ability is too powerful. It's especially effective against female cultivators. Is there any male cultivator here who can fight against them? Countless cultivators exclaimed. Among the male cultivators on the Broken Continent, Mounz and the other three Broken Thoughts were probably the strongest. Before Earth Devil and Taoist Iron Crow recovered their strength, they would be ranked behind them. Mounz and the other three human Broken Thoughts' expressions changed drastically. They knew very well how strong they were. All of them knew that even if they combined the strength of all the human male cultivators here, they would still not be a match for the two barbarian ancestors. The strongest male cultivator here was undoubtedly Ningfan. Perhaps only he had the strength to fight against the two barbarian ancestors. However, Ningfan was still in seclusion and had yet to show himself. Fellow Taoist Zhaojian, quickly come out of seclusion. Now isn't the time to go into seclusion. If you don't come out now, all of us will be in big trouble. Mounz and the others were secretly anxious, but the third ancestor's face was filled with a complacent smile. His spirit sense scanned the Broken Continent again and again. There were only two people who could pose a threat to him in this place. One was Immortal Loli, and the other was venerated Immortal Miao Yen. Both of them were currently immobilized by his ability. As for the rest of the people here, none of them was worthy of his attention. Fifth ancestor. After I subdue all the women here, you will kill all the men here. Kill these wild beasts as well. The third ancestor snorted disdainfully. His figure flashed and appeared in front of venerated Immortal Miao Yen and Immortal Loli. Then he pointed his index finger forward. A scarlet rune coiled around the tip of his finger. It was the Een Slave Talisman. If he planted this talisman into venerated Immortal Miao Yen and Immortal Loli's bodies, the two of them would never be able to betray him for the rest of their lives. Of course, he did not need their loyalty. What he needed was the primordial Een in their bodies. That was all. It's over. Just as the third ancestor finished his cold words, his expression changed drastically and he retreated immediately. However, at this moment, a dazzling seven-colored light appeared in the sky for some reason. Once the seven-colored light appeared, it immediately closed in on the third ancestor. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to see what was inside the seven-colored light. Only a few people could clearly see the figure inside the seven-colored light. It was a cold-looking young man with a dragon horn in his hand. He had a ghostly face and silver hair. His body was surrounded by a red glow and his evil chi was several times stronger than the third ancestor's. There were a total of 27 arrow shadows hovering around the young man. Some of them were six-colored, while others were seven-colored. When the arrow shadows merged together, the third ancestor did not dare to face their ferocious aura. His appearance caused the originally furious Immortal Loli to immediately reveal an excited smile. His appearance shocked venerated Immortal Miao Yen. She recognized his aura. It was very similar to the aura of a junior that she had saved in the past. His appearance put Zhao Dai at ease. It was as if as long as he was there, even if all seven barbaric ancestors were present, they would not be a threat. His appearance caused the faces of the third and fifth patriarchs to fall. After looking at him for a moment, they didn't say a word, but instead fled. He is Ningfan. He has come. Father, quickly break this evil technique. Xianxian is about to become a stone statue. Xianxian is so scared. Immortal Loli giggled and said without the slightest bit of fear. Chapter 906. Father, quickly break this evil technique. Xianxian is about to become a stone statue. Xianxian is so scared. Immortal Loli giggled and said, but she did not look scared at all. Of course, she was not afraid. As long as Ningfan was around, she would never know what fear was. Ningfan's eyes swept across the vast sky. When he saw Immortal Loli and the other female cultivators gradually turning into stone, his eyes immediately turned cold. He did not reply, but anyone who was familiar with him would definitely be able to see that he was already angry. At this moment, on the shattered continent, be it cultivators or mortals, as long as they were women, They were all struck by the third progenitor's petrifying charm technique. More and more women turned into stone statues. Only female cultivators with slightly higher cultivation could slightly slow down the speed of petrification. However, even someone as strong as Venerable Miao Yin had half of her body petrified, let alone the others. The petrified woman would not die in a short period of time, but if the petrification charm spell was not broken as soon as possible, it was only a matter of time before she died. Ordinary methods could not break this petrification technique. Even Ning Fan, who was proficient in bewitching techniques, could not break this technique head-on, due to his limited cultivation base. There was only one way to get rid of the petrification on all the women in the shortest time possible. That was to kill the person who had cast the technique. Even though Ning Fan had always been in the profound Yin world, he had already left behind a spiritual mark of the reverse spirit technique on the broken continent in the outside world. As soon as he appeared, a reverse spirit mark turned into a stream of light and flew out from the shattered continent. It flew in front of him and was swallowed by him. The moment Ning Fan swallowed the imprint, scenes of the third ancestor and fifth ancestor attacking him appeared in his sea of consciousness. In the blink of an eye, he understood everything that had happened here. Third ancestor Fan Ku, fifth ancestor Fan Xianding. The invading enemies were two ancestors of the barbarians in history. In the past, the sixth ancestor, Fan Lianxiu, had also tried to invade them. In the end, he was killed by Ning Fan. When the sixth ancestor saw Ning Fan, his first reaction was to run away. As for the third ancestor and the fifth ancestor in front of him, their first reaction when they saw Ning Fan was still to run away. The two barbaric ancestors had sharp eyesight. How could they not flee when they felt a bone-chilling sense of danger from Ning Fan? In the eyes of the cultivators and barbarians, this scene immediately had an uplifting effect. Look, it's Immortal Master Zhao. Immortal Master Zhao has come to save us. Once he arrives, even the barbarian ancestor has to flee. The barbarians cried tears of joy. It's Senior Zhao. The cultivators excitedly cheered. Fellow Taoist Zhao is finally here. Mounz and the other three Broken Thought Realm ancestors sucked in a cold breath. They were happy about Ning Fan's arrival, but at the same time, they found it hard to believe that the two powerful barbaric ancestors would run away from Ning Fan without putting up a fight. The third ancestor and the fifth ancestor, who could even easily trap venerated Miao Yin, actually fled as soon as they saw Ning Fan. This was simply unimaginable. The 200,000 wild beasts raised their necks and roared at the sky. Their expressions were filled with fervor. Following Ning Fan's arrival, the fear that the wild beasts had towards the two barbaric ancestors' bloodlines had actually decreased significantly. He's fellow Taoist Zhao Jian? This aura is so familiar. Could it be? Venerated Miao Yan's beautiful eyes widened in shock. She recognized Ning Fan's qi, but she found it hard to believe. That day when she was saved by Ning Fan, she fell into a coma and did not have the chance to meet him face to face. This was the first time she felt Ning Fan's qi. She still remembered that she had once helped a junior block the 7 Truths 7 Illusions arrow in the past. That junior's qi was extremely similar to Ning Fan's. Could they be the same person? What made venerated Miao Yin even more surprised was the dragon horn longbow in Ning Fan's hand. She was the only one in this place who could vaguely recognize this bow. If she was not mistaken, this bow should be the bow spirit of the true dragon clan's ancestral bow. However, she did not know why it was in Ning Fan's hands. The arrow light of the 27 incense sticks flew around his body. Ning Fan glanced at the third ancestor and the fifth ancestor, who were fleeing in panic. He did not chase after them. There was no need for him to chase after them. His left hand tightened its grip on the candle bow. His knuckles cracked. Slowly, he raised the candle bow and waved his right hand at the void space. Immediately, a 6-colored incense stick arrow appeared between his fingers. He knocked the arrow and drew the bow. The action of drawing the bow and knocking the arrow was completed in one go. It was almost completed in an instant. The bowstring of the bow was extremely heavy. With Ning Fan's current cultivation base, he could only draw the bowstring by 1/3. Even so, as soon as the bowstring was drawn, the power of heaven and earth immediately gathered towards the arrowhead, making the 6-colored light on the arrow even more dazzling. Faint dragon roars resounded between heaven and earth. On the body of the six-colored arrow, the shadows of 6 dragons with different colors could be vaguely seen. As soon as the shadows of the dragons appeared, the 6-colored arrow immediately carried a trace of ancient aura force. It was as if there was a pair of invisible giant hands grabbing at the third ancestor. At this moment, Ningfan loosened the bowstring and shot the arrow. He did not aim this arrow at the 5th ancestor but at the 3rd ancestor. The speed of the arrow was too fast. Even an ancient immortal venerable would not be able to dodge it. It really is an arrow condensed from the Joss flames of slaughter. Seeing Ningfan shoot the arrow at them without saying a word, the expressions of the 3rd ancestor and the 5th ancestor changed. The reason why they fled as soon as they saw Ningfan was because they were afraid of the 27 Joss flames of slaughter that were circling around Ningfan. To be more precise, they were afraid of the 3 7-colored arrows among the 27 incense sticks. The power of the Joss flames of slaughter in those arrows was specifically targeted at the barbaric ancestor. Putting aside the 6-colored arrows, the 3 7-colored arrows were too ferocious. Even the 3rd ancestor and the 5th ancestor sensed great danger from them, and did not dare to face them head-on. Sensing that Ningfan had drawn the bowstring, the 3rd ancestor's eyes were immediately filled with fear. When he realized that the arrow was aimed at him, the shock on his face deepened. However, at the next moment, he realized that the arrow Ningfan shot was not a 7-colored arrow but a 6-colored arrow that was slightly weaker. He could not help but snort coldly with a hint of disdain. This young man is really arrogant. Does he think that he can hurt me with just the 6-colored arrow in his hand? Humph. What I'm afraid of is not your 6-colored arrow but the 7-colored arrow. This arrow is nothing to be afraid of. Barbarian banners, get into formation and block this arrow for me. The 3rd ancestor suddenly turned around and stopped running. The 5th ancestor also stopped running and looked at the incoming arrow with a cold smile. The 3rd ancestor pointed his finger at the 6-colored arrow. Immediately, tens of thousands of blood banners appeared in the sky and overlapped with each other, forming tens of thousands of layers of barriers that blocked the incoming arrow. Even though the 6-colored arrow was fierce, its power was only enough to kill ordinary thought fragments. The arrow pierced through 3,000 layers of the blood banners before its power was exhausted, and the body of the arrow collapsed. Seeing that the 6-colored arrow could not penetrate the blood banners and hurt him, the 3rd ancestor snorted again with disdain. However, at the next moment his expression changed drastically. After Ningfan shot the arrow, he drew the bowstring again. This time, he shot 3 arrows at the same time. The 3 6-colored arrows merged into one. As soon as they were shot, the entire world was enveloped by the arrow intent of the 6-colored arrow. As the arrow shot out, it immediately pierced through the layers of blood banners. 3,000 layers, 6,000 layers, 9,000 layers. The 3 arrows pierced through the tens of thousands of blood banners, and finally arrived in front of the 3rd ancestor. A single 6-colored arrow might not be enough to break the defense of the blood banners, but 3 arrows at the same time were more than enough to do so. Seeing that the defense of the blood banners was broken, the 3rd ancestor's eyes darkened. He sneered and raised his hand to grab the 3 6-colored arrows. From his point of view, the power of the 3 arrows was already at the end of its flight after breaking through the layers of blood banners. It was not worth mentioning. That was why he dared to grab the arrows with his hand. The speed of the incoming arrows had already been reduced. With the 3rd ancestor's speed, he easily grabbed the 3 arrows. However, as soon as he grabbed the 6-colored arrows, his entire palm was burned by the Joss flame. He was not qualified to hold the arrows and it was difficult for him to hold them directly. Under the intense pain, the 3rd ancestor had no choice but to let go of the arrows. At the next moment, he felt a sharp pain on his shoulder. The remaining power of the 3 arrows pierced through his shoulder, leaving 3 thumb-sized bloody holes. 6 colored flames were burning around the bloody hole, eroding his body bit by bit. The flames were extremely strange, as if they contained a trace of samsara chi. Even with the 3rd ancestor's abilities, he could not extinguish the flames. All he could do was temporarily suppress them so that the flames would not spread to his body. Damn it! This arrow actually contains a trace of samsara power. That's why the flames on the arrow can't be extinguished. The third ancestor was shocked. The power of the 6 colored arrows was not enough to severely injure him. However, the trace of samsara power that invaded his body was like maggots in his bones. It was extremely troublesome and difficult to get rid of it. Ning Fan frowned slightly when he saw that the 3 arrows had injured the third ancestor, but the injury was not serious. He drew the bow again. This time he was not going to shoot the 6 colored arrows but the 7 colored arrows. With his current cultivation base, shooting 3 6-colored arrows at the same time was already his limit. He could not shoot 4 arrows at the same time. He had a clear understanding of this when he shot the 3 arrows at the same time. As for the 7-colored arrows, he could only shoot 1 arrow at a time at most. Moreover, it was not an easy task to shoot the 7-colored arrow. After shooting 4 6-colored arrows consecutively, he had already figured out the power of the 6-colored arrows. Next, he wanted to see the power of the 7-colored arrow. With the 7-colored arrow in his hand, he immediately felt a heavy pressure as if the heavens were pressing down on him. This time, it was obviously more strenuous for him to draw the bow than when he shot the 6-colored arrow. The 7-colored arrow was different from the 6-colored arrow. There were 7-inch-long grooves on the body of the arrow. In order to shoot the 7-colored arrow, he must first fill all 7 grooves. The moment he put the 7-colored arrow on the bowstring, he activated his magic power. His magic power immediately flowed into the first groove on the 7-colored arrow. The groove was like a bottomless pit. Even with Ning Fan's current magic power, he could only fill 1/10 of the groove. His magic power had been depleted, but he could not even fully light up the first of the 7 grooves. Inwardly, he was shocked by the consumption of the 7-colored arrow's magic power. He took a deep breath and began to crazily refine the 5 elemental spiritual items in his body. With the power of the great 5 elements physique, Ning Fan's magic power was replenished. Then, he poured it into the 7-colored arrow like a tidal wave. The first groove was gradually filled up and lit up with the first colorful light. Then the second groove was also filled up and lit up with the second colorful light. A moment later, the third, fourth, fifth and sixth grooves were lit up one after another. At the moment when the 7th groove was lit up, Ning Fan's entire body was covered with 7-colored flames as if he was burning. He seemed to have turned into a 7-colored fireman. He was holding a fire bow and a 7-colored fire arrow. He aimed at the third ancestor. All of a sudden, the third ancestor's expression changed drastically. He felt a chill down his spine. Before he could react, he felt a sharp pain in his chest and a bloody hole appeared out of nowhere. After that, the 7-colored arrow pierced through the air and penetrated him through the bloody hole. The light of the arrow was too fast. It was so fast that he was already hit by the arrow when he only saw a ray of 7-colored light flashing by. Karma. Karma is reversed. First, there is the effect of being hit by the arrow. Then there is the cause of drawing the bow. This bow is hard to dodge. The third ancestor covered the bloody hole in his chest with his left hand. His eyes were filled with disbelief. On his chest, the place that was pierced by the 7-colored arrow was burning with 7-colored flames that could not be extinguished. With his current cultivation base, he could not suppress the flames at all. It spread crazily to his entire body through his wound. His body was engulfed in flames like a moth flying into a flame. Bit by bit, he was burned to ashes by the 7-colored flames. The dignified third barbaric ancestor had died under the 7-colored arrow. At the moment when the third ancestor died, the women who were in a petrified state began to undo their petrification. Third ancestor is dead. She was actually killed by this brat with a single arrow. The 5th ancestor was shocked. Both of his heads bit the tip of his tongue at the same time, spurting out blood essence to activate his divine ability. Immediately, a fiery cloud appeared beneath his feet. Stepping on the fiery cloud, the 5th ancestor's speed increased tremendously. He did not dare to fight Ning Fan at all. After witnessing the death of the 3rd ancestor with his own eyes, he already had a deep fear towards the 7-colored arrow. The 7-colored arrow contained the chi of samsara power, and the power to reverse karma. With his current strength, he would not be able to withstand the destructive power of the 7-colored arrow. He tried his best to escape. However, When Ning Fan drew the bowstring and knocked the second 7-colored arrow, his heart immediately sank into despair. At this moment, he had clearly distanced himself from Ning Fan. However, this distance could not be separated by karma. As long as Ning Fan draws the bowstring, he would suffer the karma of being injured and the karma of being struck by the arrow. This karma was unavoidable and unavoidable. At this moment, when he was in a desperate situation, the fifth ancestor's senses became thousands of times sharper than usual. He gradually sensed a trace of extremely well-hidden baleful qi from Ning Fan's body. That baleful qi was obviously accumulated when he killed the sixth ancestor, Fan Lianxiu. Who exactly is this brat? He killed the third ancestor with just a single arrow. Before that, he even killed the sixth ancestor. The fifth ancestor was greatly shocked. He desperately tried to escape. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain on his back and a bloody hole the size of a fist appeared. At this moment, Ning Fan had already drawn the bowstring. At this moment, the fifth ancestor's back was instantly wounded. At the next moment, the 7-colored arrow pierced through the sky and pierced through the wound on the fifth ancestor's back. The reason why the arrow pierced through his body was because it directly shot the fifth ancestor down from the fiery cloud. At the moment when he fell from the sky, the fifth ancestor's body was engulfed in 7-colored flames. Within the raging flames, the fifth ancestor was burned into ashes bit by bit. In an instant, only 2 heads were left that had yet to turn into ashes. In the face of certain death, the fifth ancestor's eyes flashed with determination. He suddenly muttered an incantation and self-detonated the crying head among the 2 heads. As the head self-detonated, an extremely weak blood soul suddenly flew out from the other head. Without saying a word, it fled for its life. The fifth ancestor was more proficient in escaping techniques compared to the third ancestor. That was why a blood soul could escape from the 7-colored arrow's injury. Seeing that the fifth ancestor's blood soul was trying to escape, Ning Fan's eyes flashed with mockery. Golden light shone under his feet, and his speed was slightly faster than the fifth ancestor. With just a leap, he directly crossed an immeasurable distance and appeared in front of the fifth ancestor. The 5 fingers of his right hand reached out and grabbed the fifth ancestor's blood soul. With another leap, he returned to the sky above the broken continent again. Say, "Sir, please have mercy. This old man knows a huge secret, and it will definitely be of great benefit to you. As long as you swear the great oath of Heart Devil and let me go, I'm willing to tell you this secret. Do you know the 9 Heavens Imperial Court?" After being captured by Ning Fan, the fifth ancestor's face was filled with fear. He gritted his teeth as if he wanted to tell Ning Fan some secret to save his life. In reality, however, the fifth ancestor was just trying to buy time with his words. Secretly, he was accumulating his remaining magic power to prepare some kind of escape ability. As long as Ning Fan listened to him and bought him some time, he would be able to display his ability and escape from Ning Fan's evil hands. Ning Fan had experienced a few life and death situations throughout his path of cultivation. Although he might not be as intelligent as a demon, he was also quite shrewd. From the fifth ancestor's expression, Ning Fan could see a trace of scheming and calculation. He had already vaguely guessed that the fifth ancestor's purpose of telling him these things was to buy time to escape. Ning Fan was not interested in the secret that the fifth ancestor was talking about. He also did not plan to give the fifth ancestor a chance to escape. He did not search the fifth ancestor's memories. Even if the fifth ancestor's blood soul was weak, his cultivation base was still heaven-defying when he was at his peak. Ning Fan could not search his memories. He simply activated the west wind technique. Immediately, waves of chilling autumn intent appeared on his palm. This technique was enough to easily kill the fifth ancestor who was in his blood soul form. Seeing that Ning Fan was determined to kill him without giving him any time to tell him the secret, the fifth ancestor knew that there was no hope for him to escape. His eyes were filled with hatred. "Since you want to kill me, I won't let you have an easy time." Barbarian God Bones Sacrificial Technique. With my barbarian blood, bones, and life, I will create a barbarian talisman to imprison and kill this brat. I'm going to fight you to the death. Explode. 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 The fifth ancestor's eyes were filled with madness. All of a sudden, His body erupted with red light that soared into the sky. The red light was too ferocious. The moment Ning Fan saw it, he suddenly felt a sense of danger. His eyes widened. Without saying anything, he directly sent the fifth ancestor's blood soul away and retreated. However, it was already too late. At this moment, the fifth ancestor's body was covered in red light that was as dazzling as the sun. His blood soul expanded little by little, and then it exploded. Compared to dying in Ning Fan's hands, the fifth ancestor chose to self-destruct. This self-destruction was not an ordinary self-destruction, but an extremely terrifying barbarian technique. To barbarians, this technique was both an opportunity and a danger. However, to non-barbarian cultivators of foreign races, it was undoubtedly dangerous. The bloodlight that the fifth ancestor self-destructed turned into an ancient barbarian talisman. It pierced through the sky like a blood-red rainbow, and went straight towards Ning Fan. The blood talisman was too fast. In just a flash, it had traveled across a vast distance and shot into Ning Fan's body. All of a sudden, a black-red barbarian mark appeared on the left side of Ning Fan's face. At the moment when this mark appeared, Ning Fan suddenly coughed out a mouthful of black blood, and his eyes widened in shock. At the same time, the 200,000 wild beasts on the broken continent gave Ning Fan a monstrous killing intent. Even the blood seal in Ning Fan's body could not suppress that killing intent. For some unknown reason, these wild beasts suddenly became determined to kill Ning Fan. This is the barbarian summoning technique. Ning Fan's eyes darkened. He had seen this technique in the ancient books of the barbarians. The barbarians had a total of 7 kinds of lost abilities. It could awaken the young barbarian lord from thousands of barbarians. This technique was the most ferocious one. To non-barbarian cultivators, this technique was extremely destructive. It's definitely not a fortuitous encounter. Chapter 907. In the history of the barbarian tribe, there were 7 kinds of divine powers that could awaken the young barbarian lord from among the thousands of barbarians, and allow him to inherit the position of barbarian ancestor. The barbarian summoning art was one of the fiercest of them all. According to some ancient records, among the 7 berserker progenitors, the 2nd and 5th progenitors were the most skilled in this art. This technique was divided into 3 levels: low, medium, and high. Once a person was struck by a low-level berserker summoning art, the blood in their body would burn away bit by bit. There was a 1 in 1,000 chance that they would be able to create the blood of the berserker ancestor. If they failed, their blood would be greatly damaged. Once a person was struck by a middle-rank berserker summoning art, they would fall into a deep sleep for 10,000 years. When they woke up, there was a 1 in 100 chance that they would be able to create the blood of the berserker ancestors. If they failed, they would lose all their power. A barbarian mark would appear on one's body after being hit by a high-grade barbarian summoning art. This barbarian mark was a fortuitous encounter, but also a dangerous one. The berserker mark was as tempting as poppies to any berserker beast. Once someone was hit by a high-level barbarian summoning art, all the wild beasts in the wilderness would go mad. They would do everything in their power to kill the person who was hit by the barbarian summoning art. That kind of madness came from the depths of their bloodline, and there was no way to stop it. The number of berserker marks would continue to increase as the number of people killed increased. If a berserker could survive the berserker beast's pursuit, and increase the number of berserker marks he had to over 300 berserker marks, then he would have the right to refine the berserker mark into his body. Not only would his level of cultivation increase, he would also have a 10% chance of forming the berserker ancestor's blood within him, and becoming a young minister of berserkers. Casting a high-level barbarian summoning art required the barbarian ancestor to personally cast it. It required a huge price. However, as the 5th ancestor was on the verge of death, he no longer cared about his own life. Naturally, he was not afraid of paying the price and forcefully planted this technique on Ning Fan. If Ning Fan dies under the relentless pursuit of the savage beasts, the 5th ancestor would naturally die without any regrets. However, the 5th ancestor also understood that they might not be able to take Ning Fan's life just by relying on the savage beasts. Fortunately, once this barbarian summoning technique is planted, it would attract the pursuit of the other barbarian ancestors. If that's the case, Ning Fan would really be in danger. I didn't expect that the fifth ancestor would plant a barbarian summoning technique on me before he died. Ning Fan's expression was uncertain. Although he was not a barbarian, he was a tribulation spirit of Tai Tsong. The barbarians were the slaves of the tribulation spirits, and the barbarian's bloodline was created by imitating the tribulation spirit's bloodline. An ordinary cultivator would not be able to benefit from the barbarian summoning art, but Ning Fan's could do it. However, before he could reap the benefits, he had to first solve the troubles caused by the barbarian summoning art. Due to the existence of the blood restriction, the 200,000 savage beasts on the Broken Continent were originally under Ning Fan's control. However, now that the beasts had already gone mad, the blood restriction could no longer suppress their killing intent. 200,000 wild beasts soared into the sky recklessly and charged at Ning Fan. They simply did not have the slightest bit of rationality left. Countless barbarians and cultivators panicked. They couldn't understand why these beasts would suddenly go berserk. Only a few people who had heard of the barbarian summoning art guessed the reason, and Venerable Wise Words was one of them. Not good. Fellow Taoist Zhao has been hit by a high-level barbarian summoning art. Venerated Miao Yin was inwardly shocked. He immediately sent a telepathic message to Ning Fan to remind him. Fellow Taoist Zhao, be careful. Once you're under the effect of a high-grade barbarian summoning technique, all the wild beasts in the desolate land will become your greatest enemy. She had the intention to help Ning Fan deal with the beasts, but the bewitching art in her body had just been undone, so she couldn't use her magical power yet. The only thing she could do was to warn him. Immortal Loli also couldn't use her lightning power, otherwise, she would have already rushed out to help Ning Fan. In fact, there was no need for Venerable Wise Words to warn him. Ning Fan had lived in the desolate land for many years, so he had already seen the barbarian summoning art in the ancient books. Otherwise, he wouldn't have recognized it at first glance. The 200,000 wild beasts had already been bewitched by the barbarian summoning art. They were determined to kill Ning Fan, and had lost all rationality. The beasts that were as large as small mountains soared into the sky and rammed towards Ning Fan. There were also hundreds of beasts at the Duzhen and Shikong realms that spurted out black and red barbaric flashes, intending to kill Ning Fan on the spot. Humph! Just a bunch of evil beasts. How dare you attack my master? Master, quickly let me shoot them down. Master's enemy is my enemy. Master's glory is my glory. The dragon Hornbow's voice was filled with righteous indignation. The Bao spirit had already received Ning Fan's promise. In order to obtain the reward from the purple gourd, it naturally wouldn't let go of any opportunity to show off. These wild beasts were once controlled by the demon race's forbidden blood. They had slaughtered barbarians, and were also the initiators of the collapse of the desolate land. They were also standing on the opposite side of the barbarians. Therefore, the incense fire condensed from the burning joss flames of the barbarians was enough to hurt these wild beasts. Ning Fan didn't pay attention to the candle Bao's words. He stepped on the golden rainbow and dodged the barbarian flashes that pierced through the sky. The black and red barbarian mark on the left side of his face constantly emitted a burning sensation, reminding Ning Fan that the 200,000 wild beasts in front of him were bewitched by the barbarian summoning art. They were already enemies and no longer his subordinates. He tried to break the barbarian summoning art in his body, but unfortunately, this art was extremely strange. Once he was hit, he couldn't break it at all. All of you back off. Ning Fan used the power of the tribulation blood in this sentence. His words naturally carried the might of the tribulation intent. When his voice that carried the might of the tribulation intent entered the ears of the wild beasts, it immediately caused them to tremble violently. It was as if they were enlightened, causing them to be stunned on the spot. The voice that carried the might of the tribulation intent slightly dispersed the madness in the bloodline of the wild beasts. However, just a moment later, the wild beasts fell into madness again, and surrounded Ning Fan to kill him. The bewitching power of the barbarian summoning art was too strong. The wild beasts were originally afraid of the might of the tribulation intent, but now, they were no longer afraid, Some of the wild beasts did not hesitate to ignite the beast blood in their bodies and self-destruct just to kill Ning Fan. Madness. All the wild beasts had gone mad. The first to bear the brunt of it was the self-destruction of hundreds of life-immortal realm wild beasts. The chi wave that was produced directly pushed Ning Fan back 1,000 zhang. Even though he was not injured, it was not easy to deal with it. Then, another 10 duzhen savage beasts rushed towards him and self-destructed. The might of the self-destruction of 10 duzhen savage beasts was extremely terrifying. After all, Ning Fan's true cultivation base was only at the mid-duzhen realm. No matter how strong he was, he would not dare to face the self-destruction of 10 duzhen savage beasts head-on. Just as he was about to retreat, several shedding void savage beasts rushed towards him from behind. Without saying anything, they directly self-destructed. Moreover, there were more than one shedding void savage beasts. Thus, Ning Fan did not dare to face them head-on. The self-destruction of those shedding void savage beasts was like a secret signal. As soon as they self-destructed, the rest of the wild beasts actually ignited their bloodlines and self-destructed. 200,000 wild beasts went crazy and self-destructed at the same time. Perhaps even the immortal venerables of the ancient times would have to retreat slightly if they were to encounter such a terrifying force. Self-destruction, huh? Ning Fan closed his eyes and sighed inwardly. These 200,000 wild beasts used to be his beast army after all. Now, they had all self-destructed and died because of the barbarian summoning art. It was really a pity. If the wild beasts use other methods to deal with Ning Fan, he would probably be exhausted. However, if they self-destructed, in the void, Ning Fan was clearly at the center of the self-destruction storm. However, he did not try to avoid it. Instead, he directly entered the profound Yin world. Even though the self-destruction in the outside world was powerful, it could not hurt Ning Fan who was inside the profound Yin world. The cultivators on the broken continent could not see Ning Fan's movement of entering the profound Yin world. After all, Ning Fan was at the center of the self-destruction. Countless folds were formed in the hollow space due to the explosion. Their spirit sense could not penetrate into the void. When the aftermath of the self-destruction dissipated, the crowd of cultivators was shocked to find that Ning Fan appeared in front of them unscathed. Senior Zhao is really powerful. Even the self-destruction of 200,000 wild beasts could not hurt him. What exactly is his cultivation base? I initially thought that Senior Zhao was at the mid-shedding void savage realm when he was at his peak. However, it seems like I have greatly underestimated him. What mid-shedding void savage realm? I have served on Senior Mounz's spirit boat before. I heard from him that Senior Zhao's cultivation base is unfathomable. Perhaps he has already broken through the perception-breaking realm and stepped into the eternal era. Ning Fan naturally did not care about the discussions of the crowd of cultivators. The self-destruction of 200,000 wild beasts filled the void space with blood mist. The blood mist surrounded him and immediately flowed into his body due to the existence of the barbarian summoning art. There was originally only one barbarian mark on the left side of Ning Fan's face. However, after absorbing the blood chi of 200,000 wild beasts, new barbarian marks kept appearing. The second one, the third one, the fourth one. The blood chi of 200,000 wild beasts was enormous, but it only increased the number of barbarian marks on the left side of Ning Fan's face by 8. Including the first barbarian mark, Ning Fan had a total of 9 barbarian marks. The 9 barbarian marks formed the pattern of a leaf. The color of the leaf was black and red, making it look rather strange. If the number of barbarian marks reached 300, Ning Fan would have successfully awakened the young priest barbarian mark. Unfortunately, he only gained 8 barbarian marks after killing 200,000 wild beasts. If he wants to increase the number of barbarian marks through killing, he had no idea how many wild beasts he would have to kill to get to 300. Venerated Immortal, do you have any way to contact Venerated 6 Unity Immortal Venerated? Or perhaps Venerable Miao Yen, do you know where Venerable 6 Unity is now? Ning Fan landed on the broken continent and asked Venerable Miao Yen, who had also landed. Venerable Miao Yen originally had a lot of questions to ask Ning Fan, but it was not convenient for him to ask them now. He just nodded and answered. I can't contact fellow Taoist 6 Unity, but I have a way to sense his location. However, my magic power has not fully recovered yet. I still need to adjust my breathing for a while before I can sense his location. If that's the case, Venerable Miao Yan, please take a rest. I won't disturb you any longer. After exchanging a few words with Venerable Miao Yan, Ning Fan sat cross-legged on the city wall. He closed his eyes and began to sense his surroundings, activating the reverse spirit technique. The reverse spirit technique was a type of sensing ability. It also had the ability to track one's senses in reverse. Ning Fan could feel that from the moment he was struck by the barbarian summoning art, he had been locked onto by countless qi. There were more than 10 million qi that had locked onto him. Basically, all of them were wild beasts. Those qi came from all directions. At this moment, he was afraid that all the wild beasts in the wild desolate had the intention to kill him. After all, the barbarian summoning art had the ability to summon all the wild beasts in the wild desolate to besiege him. It was not hard to imagine how terrifying a force it would be to summon tens of millions of wild beasts. However, what caught Ning Fan's attention the most was that among these qi, there were actually 4 qi that were completely different from the wild beasts. These 4 qi did not conceal the aura of the barbarian ancestors at all. Thus, Ning Fan was certain that these 4 people were the other 4 barbarian ancestors besides the 3rd ancestor, the 5th ancestor and the 6th ancestor. These 4 barbarian ancestors had also locked onto him with the power of the barbarian summoning art. Perhaps they were heading towards this place to kill him. 4 barbarian ancestors and tens of millions of wild beasts. The barbarian summoning art of the 5 ancestors was really impressive. In just a short while, it had attracted countless strong enemies for Ning Fan. Ning Fan still had 26 colored arrows and 1 7-colored arrow in his hands. The only ones who had combat power that could fight against venerated immortal beings were Immortal Loli and Venerable Miao Yan. No matter how he calculated, it would be a disaster to face tens of millions of wild beasts and 4 barbarian ancestors. The only thing Ning Fan could do now was to meet up with the 6 Unity Immortal Venerates and the others as soon as possible. Then he could further increase his ability to protect himself. Not long after that, Venerable Miao Yan recovered some of her magic power and sensed the location of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerates. Under Ning Fan's control, the broken continent sped all the way to meet up with the army of the human race. At the same time, Old Ancestor Poisonous Dragon and Venerable Ao Xian's faces were filled with rage. 2 more rubies on the compass were broken. The ancient statues of the 3rd ancestor and the 5th ancestor were also destroyed. The ancient statues of the other 4 ancestors could not be found, nor could they get in touch with them. However, what enraged them the most was the battle reports that kept coming back to them. There were reports from various demon clans claiming that the wild beasts under their command had gone out of control. All the wild beasts in the desolate land had gone out of control, and the reason was unknown. Somewhere in the Gate of Life, which was filled with cold qi, a true crossing realm dragon demon was leading thousands of wild beasts to hunt down a group of human cultivators. Of course, the strength of this dragon demon was far inferior to that group of human cultivators. However, the wild beasts under his command possessed terrifying combat strength, and a large number of them. Therefore, it was a piece of cake for him to hunt down the human cultivators. Hehe. How can you human ants escape from my palm? Hiss. What's going on? That demon cultivator Duzhen was wearing a cruel and complacent expression. However, all of a sudden, he could no longer smile. For some reason, the thousands of savage beasts under Zhang Xian's command suddenly broke free of the Blood Seal's control and abandoned him. After that, the eyes of the thousands of wild beasts were filled with killing intent as they flew towards a certain direction. All the wild beasts had left the battlefield. Only True Dragon Demon Du was left to face a large group of human cultivators. What was a reversal of the situation? This was a reversal of the situation. Hiss! How could this happen? Why did the Blood Seal go out of control? Where are these wild beasts going? Why aren't they listening to my orders? True Dragon Demon Du was shocked while the human cultivators who were running for their lives were overjoyed. Quick! This old demon is alone. All the wild beasts have left him. Kill him. Although I don't understand what happened, it's definitely a good thing for us that the wild beasts have left. Kill. 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 The human cultivators swarmed forward and immediately turned this true dragon demon into minced meat. The same scene did not only happen here but also in countless other broken worlds. In a world with a whistling chilly wind, a thought-fragmenting demon cultivator was leading 300,000 wild beasts to chase after a human army. All of a sudden, all 300,000 wild beasts went out of control and left the battlefield. As for that thought-fragmenting demon cultivator, he was immediately besieged by the human cultivators. In a certain broken world, a group of human cultivators was flying cautiously. When they saw a large group of wild beasts flying past them, all of their faces turned pale with fright. Normally, when wild beasts encounter cultivators, they would definitely chase after them endlessly. However, the strange thing was that the wild beasts that passed by this place did not seem to notice the change in the group of human cultivators. They just passed by without killing any of them. The wild beasts that obeyed the orders of the demon race were gone. The ferocious wild beasts that would kill anyone they see were also gone. At this moment, all the wild beasts only wanted to do one thing: to chase after Ningfan with all their might and kill him. The barbarian summoning art was a kind of temptation that came from the bloodline. It could make all the wild beasts in the desolate world put down everything and kill Ningfan alone. As a result, all the demon cultivators were tricked. Countless demon cultivators were ruthlessly killed by the human race. Because the wild beasts suddenly left the battlefield, unfavorable battle reports were sent back to the demon race, which made Aoxian and Old Ancestor Poisonous Dragon even more shocked and furious. However, they did not understand what had happened. In the plan of blood sacrifice in the desolate world, the wild beasts were the main support of the demon race. Without the help of the wild beasts, the demon race would no longer have the advantage against the human race. Damn it! What exactly is happening in the desolate world now? Why would the wild beasts go crazy if nothing unexpected happened? We can't find the stone statue of the barbaric ancestor, and the wild beasts have also gone out of control. Is the plan of blood sacrifice really going to fail? Somewhere in the void, a two-headed old man was flying on a flying sword. His eyes were dark like the netherworld and had the ability to absorb people's souls. The flying sword under his feet was a blood-red bone sword. He was the first barbaric ancestor, Fan Sangu. The chi of a high-grade barbarian summoning technique. Judging from this chi, it should be planted by the fifth ancestor and not the second ancestor. The death chi in this barbarian summoning technique is very strong. It should be planted by the fifth ancestor after risking his life. Is the fifth ancestor dead? Who dares to kill the barbaric ancestor? Courting death. The eyes of the first barbaric ancestor immediately burst out with sky-piercing killing intent. He suddenly changed the direction of the bone sword and dashed towards Ningfan's direction. On a certain broken continent, there was a gigantic tomb made of bluestone. The death chi around the tomb was extremely dense. There was a skeleton soldier patrolling every 100 steps. This gigantic tomb had already appeared on this continent a few days ago. The moment the tomb appeared, countless barbarians lost their flesh and blood, and turned into skeleton soldiers. There was no chi coming from the tomb at first. However, the moment Ningfan was affected by the barbarian summoning technique, the tomb exploded from the center. A stone giant with two heads sat up from the tomb, and slowly turned into a two-headed old man. Half of the two-headed old man's body was made of flesh and blood while the other half was just a skeleton. His appearance was extremely strange. This person was the second ancestor, Fanzong. Is the fifth ancestor dead? This hand-summoning barbarian art of his might become my nourishment. 9 barbarian marks? Not bad. It can be considered a small nourishment. It's a pity. I should wait a little longer. I need to be patient. The second ancestor's body swayed and disappeared from the place. At the same time, all the skeleton soldiers on the continent let out a miserable cry and turned into ashes. Somewhere in the gate of death, a plump two-headed old man was sitting cross-legged on a gigantic blood shadow beast while cultivating. He was the fourth ancestor, Fan Shoufei. After sensing the chi of the barbarian summoning technique, The fourth ancestor slowly opened his eyes and revealed an extremely strange smile. 9 barbarian marks? Not enough. It's still not enough. Only when you have more than 100 barbarian marks will it be considered a great nourishment. The fifth ancestor is dead, but he has left us a great gift. The fourth ancestor licked his lips and flew out of the gate of death while riding the gigantic bloodshadow beast. Among the 4 remaining barbarian ancestors, 3 of them secretly chased after Ning Fan. Only the 7th ancestor, Fan Mokong, was sitting in the void somewhere. His hands were still forming hand seals, and he did not care about the barbarian summoning technique. His eyes were empty and his expression was numb. He did not have spiritual intelligence like the other barbarian ancestors. He was like a machine or a puppet. He only knew how to form hand seals over and over again. He did not seem to care about anything else. His mouth was chanting intermittent incantations from time to time. Every time he chanted the incantation, a gigantic shadow of a chessboard would appear beneath him and disappear in a flash. If the experienced 4 heavens-old monsters were here, they would certainly recognize that the shadow of the chessboard was somewhat similar to the supreme treasure of the immortal Emperor Fate Master. The Karma chessboard. If Ning Fan was here, he would certainly notice that there was a faint connection between the 7th ancestor and the immortal Emperor Fate Master. Unfortunately, Ning Fan was not here, and he did not see the shadow of the chessboard. Along the way, Ning Fan constantly encountered groups of barbarian beasts. As soon as they saw Ning Fan, they immediately rushed towards him. They subconsciously chose to self-detonate, wanting to kill Ning Fan. If it were those cultivators who did not have mid-Kiliacosm treasures, most of them would have been blown to smithereens by the self-detonation of the barbarian beasts. Unfortunately, Ning Fan was the master of the profound Een world. Every time he was attacked by the barbarian beasts, he would directly fly away from the broken continent and lure them to self-detonate at a distance. As long as he could escape into the profound Een world in time, none of the self-detonation of the barbarian beasts could hurt him. Along the way, Ning Fan encountered 2 thought fragmentation realm barbarian beasts. The self-detonation of these 2 barbarian beasts caused the profound Een world to tremble slightly. However, that was all. The damage caused by the self-detonation could not reach the profound Een world at all. Since the self-detonation of these barbarian beasts could not kill Ning Fan, it was as if they were constantly sending him benefits. Ning Fan continued to absorb the blood chi produced by the dead barbarian beasts. The number of barbarian marks on his left side kept increasing. In the beginning, there were 9 marks, but now, there were 45 marks. The pattern on the left had also changed from 1 leaf to 4. Along the way, there were already nearly 2 million wild beasts who came to him to self-detonate. With countless precedents, Ning Fan was no longer worried about the remaining wild beasts attacking him. He was not afraid of self-destruction. The only thing he cared about was the 4 barbaric ancestors who had locked onto him. What made Ning Fan rejoice was that for some unknown reason, only 3 of the 4 barbaric ancestors were chasing after him. The remaining barbaric ancestor was different from the other barbaric ancestors. Even though he had locked onto Ning Fan with his chi, he did not bother to chase after him. If there are only 3 barbaric ancestors who come to attack us, once they meet up with 6 Unity Immortal Venerate, there's nothing to be afraid of. With 6 Unity, Miao Yan Immortal Lowly and Ning Fan's 7-colored arrow, the 3 barbaric ancestors would certainly not have a good ending if they come knocking on their door. I just didn't expect that the higher the level of the Berserker mark, the harder it is to increase the number of Berserker marks. In the beginning, I could gain 8 Berserker marks by killing 200,000 monsters. However, after 10 Berserker marks, I could only gain 4 to 5 Berserker marks after killing 2 to 300,000 monsters. Only those who have 300 Berserker marks can become the young priest of the barbarian race. In that case, it would be difficult for me to gather 300 Berserker marks, even if I kill all the wild beasts in the desolate wasteland. Ning Fan shook his head slightly. Even though the number of Berserker marks was constantly increasing, he did not sense any substantial benefits. He was getting closer and closer to the location that Venerate Miao Yan had pointed out. According to Ning Fan's estimation, he would be able to meet up with the army of 6 Unity Immortal Venerates in a short while. After encountering another batch of wild beasts who self-detonated, Ning Fan absorbed the blood qi left behind by all of them. The number of berserker marks increased to 46. The moment the number of berserker marks reached 46, the pattern on the left side of Ning Fan's face suddenly changed. It was originally a pattern with 4 leaves. However, when the 46th berserker mark appeared, a pattern of a 6-edged snowflake appeared between the 4 leaves. At the moment when the snowflake appeared, traces of barbaric blood were directly produced in Ning Fan's body. Barbaric blood was a type of bloodline that imitated the calamity blood. Once it appeared in Ning Fan's body, it was immediately devoured by the tyrannical calamity blood. After devouring the barbaric blood, the grade of Ning Fan's calamity blood increased bit by bit. In just an hour, his calamity blood had risen from 6 stars remnant blood to 7 stars remnant blood. 46 for leaves, 6-edged snowflake. The grade of the calamity blood has actually increased. Ning Fan's eyes flashed. He suddenly felt a little expectant about the increase of the berserker mark on the left side of his face. 45 berserker marks did not have any effect. However, when the 46th berserker mark appeared, he would be able to cultivate barbaric blood, which could be used to increase the grade of his calamity blood. 46 berserker marks. Even though it hasn't reached 100, it should be quite useful. It seems like I'm the first one to catch up to this young man. It seems a little troublesome. Should I attack this young man? There's actually a female venerate of the human race on this broken continent. Could it be that the 5th ancestor died in the hands of this female venerate? It doesn't seem appropriate for me to act rashly. Should I wait for the others? Far away from them, the 4th ancestor was sitting on the blood shadow gigantic beast. He was chasing after the broken continent with all his might. Suddenly, his expression turned extremely ugly. He had only taken a quick glance at them, and he did not see through Ning Fan and Immortal Lowly's strength. He only knew that there was an immortal venerate named Venerate Wise Words on this continent. Today, however, the chi of a second immortal venerate expert had appeared. Fellow Taoist Wise Words, I'm very happy that you can return safely. Not far away from the broken continent, the voice of a 6 Unity Immortal Venerate suddenly resounded. This place was already not far away from where the human army was. Just as the voice faded away, an army of the human army approached from afar to welcome the return of Venerate Wise Words. It's the voice of a 6 Unity Immortal Venerate. It's the Een Hai Army, one of the 6 Unity Army. We've finally met up with the main army. Immediately, the cheers of countless cultivators could be heard from the broken continent. Soon, they would reach the encampment of the human race. The 4th ancestor's expression was extremely unpleasant. If there was only one immortal venerate here, he would still dare to attack Ning Fan. However, if there was another immortal venerate, he would have to plan carefully. Let's wait a little longer. We'll make a decision after the other barbarian ancestors arrive. The 4th ancestor made his decision cautiously. I basically spent the new year lying down. Recently, my body has been very weak and I haven't updated a lot. I'm sorry. I hope that I can update steadily in the 3rd month of March and get a perfect attendance award. Ink was also feeling very pained during the days when there were no updates. He did not like his current appearance. Chapter 908. Due to the 4th ancestor's cautiousness, he did not dare to stay in this place for too long. He was afraid that the 2 immortal venerables of the human race would discover him and alert them. He concealed his chi and decided to leave this place temporarily. However, his chi was still locked on Ning Fan, waiting for the arrival of the other barbarian ancestors. The 4th ancestor's concealment technique was extremely profound. No one on the entire broken continent could sense his arrival and departure except for Ning Fan. Noticing that the 4th ancestor had left, Ning Fan frowned slightly but did not say anything. He shifted his gaze to the front and saw 16 spirit boats enshrouded in immortal chi sailing towards him from afar. On each of the spirit boats, there were many spirit flags with the words Een and Hai written on them. Ning Fan had heard about the 6 combat divisions under the command of 6 Unity Immortal Venerables. He had even saved one of the combat divisions, Zichou. Thus, he naturally knew that it was the Yin High Combat Division that came to welcome Venerables Miao Yan. The commander of the Yin High Combat Division was an early thought fragmentation realm old monster of the human race. His name was Sang Chong. As the 16 spirit boats approached him, Sang Chong immediately flew down from the spirit boats and landed on the broken continent. Then, he bowed respectfully to Venerables Miao Yan. Sang Chong naturally did not dare to show any neglect in front of a dignified immortal Venerables. Subordinate Sang Chong welcomes the return of Venerables. 6 Unity Immortal Venerables has issued an order to invite Venerables to the Southly Fire Formation in advance. As for the people here, I'll lead them into the fire formation. Fellow Taoist 6 Unity has actually activated the Southly Fire diagram and set up the Southly Fire Formation here? Venerables Miao Yan was slightly surprised. The Southly Fire diagram was a 12 Nirvana post-celestial Nirvana magic treasure that 6 Unity Immortal Venerables had spent millions of years to refine. As far as she knew, the Southly Fire diagram of 6 Unity Immortal Venerables had yet to be completely refined. How could he already use this treasure to set up a fire formation? She spread her spirit sense to the void in front of her. At the end of the void, she saw a large sea of fire grand formation that suddenly appeared in the void. The sea of fire connected with the general momentum and formed a killing formation diagram. Within the formation diagram, there were tens of broken continents that were connected to each other, forming a gigantic continent. Nearly 1 million human cultivators were stationed on the continent. In the 3 directions of the continent, there were 3 towering peaks, arranged in a triangular formation. The first peak was 9,000 feet tall, the second was 6,000 feet tall, and the third was less than 1,000 feet tall. So this treasure has yet to be completely refined. It's still a half-finished product, huh? Venerated Miao Yan muttered to himself. He glanced at Ning Fan and pondered for a moment before speaking to Sang Chong. Since the 6 Directions Celestial Sovereign has invited me to meet him, I will make a move first. I will have to trouble Commander Sang to lead the others into the fire formation. As soon as he finished speaking, Venerated Miao Yan transmitted his voice to Ning Fan. Fellow Taoist Zhao, I owe you a debt of gratitude for saving my life. However, I have been unconscious ever since the day I was saved. Thus, I haven't had the time to repay you. At this moment, I'm anxious to meet fellow Taoist Lu Ha to discuss the important matters of the wildlands. Later, I'll come to find fellow Taoist and give you a precious treasure that I've kept for many years to repay fellow Taoist for saving my life. After making the solemn promise, Venerated Miao Yan tapped the ground with the tip of his feet and flew away from the broken continent. In just a flash, he had already crossed countless voids and flew forward. Ning Fan looked at Venerated Miao Yan's departing figure with a calm expression. The reason why he saved Venerated Miao Yan was to repay him for saving his life that day. He did not really care about the precious treasure that Venerated Miao Yan mentioned. I'm Sang Chong from the Yin Sea War Division. Greetings, fellow Taoists. After Venerated Miao Yan left, Sang Chong greeted Mounz, Old Ancestor Jin Hua, Tung Nan, Tung Bei and the other human Broken Thought Realm cultivators who were controlling the Broken Continent. From Sang Chong's point of view, it was not surprising that the 4 human Broken Thought Realm cultivators were able to make the Broken Continent fly, like a postnatal magic treasure. What made him slightly surprised was that there were actually Berserker tribe mortals on this Broken Continent. In his opinion, this Broken Continent should be the temporary resting place of Venerated Miao Yan. The human cultivators on this continent were probably the people that Venerated Miao Yan had saved along the way. It was reasonable for Venerated Miao Yan to save the human cultivators during the great calamity of the desolate world. But why did he save some barbarian mortals? Sang Chong could not figure it out. However, as far as he knew, the 6 combinations Immortal Venerated Miao Yan happened to need some mortals as sacrificial offerings. When the time comes, I can choose some of these barbarians as sacrificial offerings to the 6 combinations Immortal Venerated Miao Yan. The life and death of these barbarians is just a small matter. However, it concerns the safety of the human cultivators. I think Venerated Miao Yin won't care about the lives of these barbarians. Sang Chong thought to himself. The 16 spirit boats led the broken continent forward at full speed. The journey was not far. Therefore, Sang Chong did not talk much with the few broken thought realm cultivators along the way. He knew nothing about what they had encountered along the way. Naturally, he did not know about Ning Fan's impressive achievements along the way. Therefore, Sang Chong had yet to see how extraordinary Ning Fan was. He also did not pay any attention to him. Even if he spoke occasionally, he would only talk to Tung Nan and Tung Bei. He did not talk much with Mounz and old ancestor Jin Hua, the two old monsters of the Devil Dao. This was the problem with Sang Chong's personality. He was an orthodox, profound cultivator. That was why he hated devil cultivators. That was the reason why he was too lazy to pay attention to Mounz and old ancestor Jin Hua. Of course, the reason why he dared to slight Mounz and the others was because his cultivation base was at the early thought realm like Mounz. If Mounz was a mid-thought realm devil cultivator, he would not dare to slight them. He still knew how to be flexible. Mounz and old ancestor Jin Hua were naturally displeased by Sang Chong's cold attitude. However, they did not say anything. Soon, an endless sea of fire appeared in front of them. They were connected to each other and formed a formation diagram. This formation was called the Southly Fire Formation. It was created by the 6 combinations Immortal Venerated Jin Hua's semi-finished magic treasure, the Southly Fire Diagram. It was used to protect the human cultivators in this place. Even with his eyesight at the 2nd level of the Heaven Realm, he actually could not see through the mysteries of this formation at first glance. After activating the secret word force, he finally saw through all the veins of this formation. Inwardly, he was surprised by how extraordinary this formation was. This formation is extraordinary. It is transformed from a magic treasure, the fire diagram. However, that fire diagram seems to be incomplete. It is just a semi-finished product. The 3 fire mountains in the middle of the grand formation are the source of the power of this formation. The first mountain is 9,000 zhang tall. The second mountain is only 6,000 zhang tall, and the third mountain is only 3,000 zhang tall. If this fire diagram is successfully refined, the last 2 fire mountains will also be 9,000 zhang tall. When the time comes, the 3 mountains will merge and the power of the fire will be stacked. The power of this formation is enough to threaten the life of an ordinary immortal venerated. As Sang Chong took out a fiery red token, a passage of fire immediately appeared above the Sea of Fire Grand Formation. Sang Chong suddenly activated his divine ability and transmitted his voice to the entire heavenly barbarian city. We are about to enter the central area of the Southly Fire Formation. This formation was created by a 6 combinations Immortal Venerated. The continents in the formation are arranged according to the fire mountains. Before entering the Southly Fire Formation, I want to inform everyone of the rules set by the 6 combinations Immortal Venerated. The first mountain is 9,000 zhang tall, and is located in the north of the continent. That is the place where the 6 combinations Immortal Venerated goes into seclusion. Those who do not have a cultivation base at the 2nd step are not allowed to step into the area of the first mountain. Those who are cultivators of the Gong sect are not subject to this rule. The 2nd mountain is 6,000 zhang tall, and is located in the southwest of the continent. Those who do not have a cultivation base at the Void Fragmentation Realm or above are not allowed to step into the area of the 2nd mountain. Those who are cultivators of the Gong sect are not subject to this rule. The 3rd mountain is 3,000 zhang tall, and is located in the southeast of the continent. Those who do not have a high cultivation base and are not cultivators of the Gong sect can only stay in the area of the 3rd mountain and wait for orders. No mistakes are allowed. Apart from that, cultivators who are not cultivators of the Gong sect must also abide by the 9 orders and 16 prohibitions. Some cultivators of the Devil Dao must strictly abide by this order, and are not allowed to disobey it. Sang Chong's cold eyes swept across Mounz and the others, secretly warning them. Then he took out an imperial edict made of yellow silk, and began to issue the various decrees of the 6 combinations Immortal Venerated. The cultivators in the heavenly barbarian city became spirited after hearing what he said. They engraved these decrees in their hearts and did not dare to disobey them. Some cultivators of the Devil Tao, in particular, were even more cautious in their words and actions after hearing these rules. They were afraid of doing something wrong and getting themselves in trouble. Everyone knew that the 6 combinations Immortal venerated was an extremely old-fashioned cultivator who valued rules the most. Everyone naturally had to obey the rules set by the 6 combinations Immortal venerated. Otherwise, they would be going against the 6 combinations Immortal venerated. Rules. 9 orders and 16 prohibitions. He could naturally tell that all the rules set by the 6 combinations Immortal venerated were targeted at cultivators who were not cultivators of the Gong sect. If one joins the 4 Puppet sect, he would not be restricted by any rules when he walks in this place. On the contrary, if one is not a cultivator of the Gong sect, he or she would be restricted by many rules. Ning Fan did not raise any objection to all of this. Now that he was under the protection of a 6 combinations Immortal venerated, he naturally would not deliberately break the rules and challenge the dignity of a 6 combinations Immortal venerated. The 16 spirit boats led the broken continent towards the territory of the 3rd peak. After all, there were too many low-grade cultivators in the Heaven Man City and millions of mortals. According to the rules set by the 6 combinations Immortal venerated, they were not allowed to enter the territory of the 1st and 2nd peaks without permission. They could only come to the 3rd peak. Under the power of Mounz and the other 3 thought-breaking realm experts, the broken continent where the Heaven Man City was located directly merged with the continent of the 3rd peak and became one. Countless cultivators were already waiting at the foot of the 3rd peak. Chunzong was an elder of the vast cold sect in the northern heaven. However, judging from his appearance, he looked like a 70 or 80 years old mortal old man. In reality, he was a late shedding void realm expert. He led a small group of second-step cultivators of the vast cold sect and waited here, because he sensed a trace of the chi of the vast cold sect's cultivators in the broken continent. Oh, isn't this Elder Han Wu? Chunzong stroked his long beard gently and smiled warmly. Then he led a group of vast cold sect's cultivators towards them. Master Chun, you're here too. How would Fairy Han Wu dare to be negligent? Even though she and Chunzong were both shedding void realm experts, Chunzong was half a master to her. If it wasn't for Chunzong's guidance in the past, she would never have the chance to step into the shedding void realm. Therefore, when Chunzong arrived, she immediately went forward to greet him. After chatting for a while, Chunzong suggested that Han Wu should go with the cultivators of the vast cold palace to the area of the 1st peak. Chunzong was half a master to Fairy Han Wu. Of course, Han Wu would not dare to reject his suggestion. However, she did not want to leave his side either. Ning, fellow Taoist Zhao, are you willing to go with me to the area of the 1st peak? With your cultivation base, even if you're not a cultivator of the puppet sect, you can still enter the 1st peak. Fairy Han Wu asked with a hint of hope. No, I think it's better for me to stay on the 3rd peak. After all, there are a large number of barbarians who will be accompanying us this time. They can only stay on the 3rd peak. I don't want to leave them behind. Ning Fan said helplessly. Then I won't go to the 1st peak as well. Just as Han Wu opened her mouth, she was interrupted by Ning Fan with a smile. Now that you've come to this place, you're already considered to be out of danger. You can follow the cultivators of your sect to the 1st peak. If you need anything, you can just come to the 3rd peak to look for me. Han Wu pondered for a while and felt that Ning Fan's words made sense. If she wants to see Ning Fan again, she can just come to the 3rd peak. She solemnly bowed to Ning Fan and thanked him for saving her life. Then, she followed the cultivators of the vast cold palace and flew towards the direction of the 1st peak. Her bow had shocked all the cultivators of the vast cold palace, including Chunzong. In their impression, Fairy Han Wu's temperament was cold and indifferent. She had never been kind to any man. Today, however, she was looking at Ning Fan with affection. Moreover, she even said that Ning Fan had saved her life. Ugh! Who is this ghost-faced cultivator? How could he make Elder Han Wu, who has a cold temperament, show such an expression? Each of the cultivators of the vast cold palace felt that it was inconceivable. On the other side, the four-eyed devil monarch had also found a few of his best friends. His friends were also from the northern Heaven Corpse Devil ancient region. They were a few late True Crossing Realm and Peak True Crossing Realm rogue cultivators. They were also resting at the first peak, and invited the four-eyed devil monarch to go with them. The four-eyed devil monarch didn't hesitate. After repeatedly thanking Ning Fan for saving her life, he went to the first peak with his friends. Along the way, Ning Fan had saved many cultivators. When these cultivators returned to the encampment of the human race, they would naturally leave Ning Fan's side. Ning Fan didn't mind it at all. The cultivators who were saved kept thanking Ning Fan for saving their lives and left the third peak. In the end, even the cultivators of the Zichou Combat Division expressed their gratitude to Ning Fan. Sang Chong's expression finally changed. He began to pay attention to Ning Fan. He saw that among those cultivators who thanked Ning Fan, there were first-step cultivators, human profound and ghost profound life immortals, Duzhan and Shikong true immortals. What surprised him the most was that even Tung Nan and Tung Bei, who were early thought-shattering true immortals, also expressed their gratitude to Ning Fan. They also thanked Ning Fan for saving their lives. Sang Chong was shocked. He initially thought that Ning Fan was at the mid-shedding void realm before being suppressed by the forbidden immortal force. But if Ning Fan only had this cultivation base, how could he have saved Tung Nan and Tung Bei's lives? Sang Chong knew that he had underestimated Ning Fan's true cultivation base. Ning Fan's true cultivation base couldn't possibly be at the mid-shedding void realm. Sang Chong even saw a trace of respect in Tung Nan and Tung Bei's eyes. Could it be that this ghost-faced cultivator is a mid-thought-shattering cultivator? Otherwise, how could he make Tung Nan and Tung Bei show such respect to him? What qualifications does he have to save their lives? Sang Chong thought to himself. If Ning Fan was really a mid-thought-shattering cultivator, it would be worthwhile for him to befriend him. However, Ning Fan's chi was extremely cold. With Sang Chong's experience, he could vaguely guess that Ning Fan was an evil cultivator. Although he hated evil cultivators, if Ning Fan's cultivation base was higher than his, he wouldn't dare to neglect Ning Fan. May I ask, Brother Tung, what is the name of this ghost-faced cultivator? What is his background, and what is his cultivation base? Why do you owe him a life-saving debt? Sang Chong asked Tung Nan and Tung Bei in a low voice after pondering for a moment. Before Tung Nan and Tung Bei could answer, Mounzi sneered and looked at Sang Chong with disdain. You don't know Senior Zhao Jian? Aren't you a little too ill-informed? Sang Chong's heart skipped a beat. Did he hear it wrongly? Mounzi addressed Ning Fan as senior. Mounzi was a thought-shattering cultivator. Even if he was facing a peak thought-shattering cultivator, he didn't need to address him as senior. What kind of person could make Mounzi address him as senior willingly? Could it be that this ghost-faced cultivator is an eternal ancient realm cultivator? Could it be that there is a third immortal venerable in the desolate land other than Miao Yan and Lu He? But how is this possible? There are less than 1,004 heavens immortal venerables outside of the secret races. I have never heard of an immortal venerable called Zhao Jian. Even in the thought-shattering realm, there isn't anyone with this name. Sang Chong's mind was filled with doubts. He secretly spread out his spirit sense and scanned Ning Fan's body. As soon as he did so, he felt a sharp pain in his sea of consciousness. His face turned pale with fright. Before the spirit sense that invaded Ning Fan's body could find anything, all of them strangely disappeared, as if they were forcefully devoured by something. He spread out his spirit sense again and again. However, each time his spirit sense disappeared into Ning Fan's body like a clay ox entering the sea. He couldn't retrieve it even if he wanted to. One should know that Sang Chong's cultivation base was at the early thought-shattering realm. Although his strength wasn't considered strong among those at the early thought-shattering realm, his spirit sense cultivation base was extremely high. His spirit sense cultivation base was not much weaker than some mid-thought-shattering realm old monsters. With his spirit sense cultivation base, even if the other party was a peak thought-shattering realm old monster, he wouldn't be able to intercept his spirit sense. At most, he would be unable to sense his spirit sense. However, Ning Fan was able to do such a thing. What did this mean? It was highly possible that Ning Fan was really an eternal ancient realm old monster. Sang Chong was still in shock. Suddenly his face turned pale. At this moment, Ning Fan's eyes were as cold as lightning. Sang Chong was shocked. He knew that Ning Fan was angry and dissatisfied with his continuous spying. He immediately begged for mercy. "Senior, please calm down. I didn't mean any harm by spying on you." Sang Chong didn't know that Ning Fan's cold gaze was not directed at him. Ning Fan didn't blame Sang Chong for spying on him. He didn't take the initiative to devour Sang Chong's spirit sense. The thing that devoured Sang Chong's spirit sense was the 46 barbarian marks on Ning Fan's left face. Ning Fan didn't know that even an early thought-shattering realm expert like Sang Chong couldn't probe him after he had these barbarian marks on his body. Once someone tried to probe him, his spirit sense would be forcefully devoured by the barbarian marks. These barbarian marks were very domineering. Moreover, it was fine that these barbarian marks devoured Sang Chong's spirit sense. After that, they seemed to have tasted the sweetness of success and became restless, wanting to devour the spirit sense in Ning Fan's sea of consciousness. What kind of person was Ning Fan? How could he allow the barbarian marks on his body to devour his spirit sense? His eyes were as cold as lightning. His gaze was naturally directed at the disobedient barbarian mark. This bold barbarian mark actually wanted to devour its master. "No matter what, I have to erupt once today. It was cut off yesterday. 3 months, I can't be dispirited." Chapter 909. What kind of person was Ning Fan? How could he allow his barbarian mark to devour its master? His gaze sharpened, and the calamity blood in his body was immediately activated. The Tide Song calamity might filled his entire body. At this moment, the devilish nature in his body was so strong that it surpassed any of the other devil cultivators here. The barbarian mark was the divine ability of the barbarian tribe, so it was only natural that it was afraid of the robbery power. Therefore, once Ning Fan activated the power of the calamity blood, the backlash from the barbarian mark was forcefully suppressed in just a split second. Barbarian marks were domineering, but Ning Fan was even more domineering. His gaze was like cold lightning. Although it wasn't directed at Sang Chong, it still scared him. Sang Chong already believed that Ning Fan was an ancient immortal venerable, and an old monster of the evil Tao. He could never afford to offend such a person. "Senior, Junior Sang Chong really didn't mean to investigate you. If this junior knew that you were the eternal immortal sovereign, even if you beat this junior to death, this junior wouldn't dare to investigate you. I'm the trusted aide of a 6 combos celestial supremacy after all. If you want to attack me, you have to ask the 6 combos celestial supremacy first, right?" Sang Chong groaned inwardly. Ning Fan, however, retracted the coldness in his eyes and said indifferently, "Just this once." Since the other party had mistaken him for the 10,000 ancient immortal sovereign, he did not mind pretending to be the 10,000 ancient immortal sovereign. Along the way, he had killed 3 barbaric ancestors whose cultivation bases were comparable to immortal venerables in front of everyone. Such an achievement was already shocking, and there was no way for him to conceal it. If he said that he wasn't an immortal exalt, there would probably be no one that would believe him. Moreover, it would most likely draw countless troubles to him. So it would be better to pretend to be an immortal exalt, and it would be much more convenient for him to do things. Seeing that Ning Fan did not blame him, Sang Chong could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Seeing Sang Chong being humiliated, Mounz and old ancestor Jin Hua, who had always been treated coldly by Sang Chong, felt extremely pleased. They continued to tell Sang Chong about his glorious achievements along the way. For example, Ning Fan was not afraid of the dangers of the Gate of Death. He insisted on going through the Gate of Death and saved venerated Miao Yan. For example, Ning Fan had a daughter whose name was Xian Xian. She could summon the Dark Thunder War Chariot, which was close to the 10th grade. Her strength was practically on par with venerated Miao Yan. Another example was that he had consecutively killed 3 barbaric ancestors who were comparable to immortal venerables. His strength had become even more terrifying. The more Sang Chong listened, the more astonished he became. He could not imagine that Ning Fan had a daughter who could fight against immortal venerables, and he himself had even killed 3 immortal venerables in a row. After the initial shock, they were overjoyed. Now that the desolate wilderness was facing a calamity, the safety of everyone would naturally be better protected with the arrival of an expert like Ning Fan. An hour later, Mounz and the others bid farewell to Ning Fan and went to the first peak. As for Ning Fan, he stayed on the third peak. Before Sang Chong left, Ning Fan asked Sang Chong to stay behind. Facing Sang Chong's fearful expression, Ning Fan asked him many questions before letting him go. To Ning Fan's questions, Sang Chong told him everything he knew. He did not dare to conceal anything at all. Most of the things that Ning Fan asked were related to the collapse of the wild world. Not everyone had the right to know such information. However, Sang Chong believed that Ning Fan was qualified to do so. Today was the 5th day of the blood sacrifice in the wild wilderness. Ning Fan had just entered the 3rd peak of the Southly Fire Formation, and his name had already spread across the entire continent. More and more cultivators came to the 3rd peak because of his fame. They wanted to admire Ning Fan's demeanor. However, Ning Fan did not go to meet anyone. The Heaven Barbarian City was not far away from the 3rd peak. Most of the cultivators that he had saved had gone to the 1st and 2nd peaks. Only a few of them stayed on the 3rd peak. Currently, there were only Immortal Loli, Lu Yan, Zhao Dai, Immortal Concubine Zhongyu, Earth Devil and Taoist Iron Crow by his side. Ning Fan stood alone on the city wall of the Heaven Barbarian City with a solemn expression. Ning Fan had heard many things from Sang Chong. For example, he heard about the incident where Lu Ha and Miao Yan activated the Heaven Sealing Immortal Edict. The Heaven Sealing Immortal Edict could only seal the desolate wilderness for 7 days. On the 8th day, the power of the Heaven Sealing Immortal Edict would surely dissipate. At that time, the ancient passage that was sleeping in the ancient wild region would probably be summoned by the demon race. The demon race has planned so many things for the sake of heading to the ancient passage of the Heaven Barbarian Ancient Realm. The ancient passage and the Heaven Barbarian Ancient Realm. Ning Fan did not know much about the secrets of the Heaven Barbarian Ancient Realm. However, it was not his first time hearing about it. The Heaven Barbarian Ancient Realm was a place that was different from the 4 heavens and 9 worlds, the ancient Devil's Abyss and the land of demon spirits. In order to enter that place, one could only use the ancient passage. Having the passage alone was not enough. One would also need the key. Ning Fan had once searched through the memories of the Candle Bow. He knew that the previous owner of the bow, the ancestral dragon Zhu Li, had died in battle in the Heaven Barbarian Ancient Realm. Ning Fan had no idea what kind of place the Heaven Barbarian Ancient Realm was. It was the supreme secret of heaven and earth. It was not something that Ning Fan was qualified to know now. Besides, he did not plan to get involved in such a huge matter with his current cultivation base. The barbarian mark on the left side of his face kept giving him a feeling of being locked on. It made Ning Fan put away his thoughts for a while. He activated the reverse spirit technique and carefully sensed the wild beasts that had locked onto him. His brows gradually knitted together. Somehow, the chi of the wild beasts that were charging at him began to gather in a certain direction. In a world that was extremely far away from the Southly Fire Formation, the 4th ancestor was sitting on a blood shadow gigantic beast. They were discussing something with the 2nd ancestor. In front of the two of them, there were countless wild beasts that were charging towards them and gathering at this place. Seeing this scene, the 4th ancestor slightly narrowed his eyes and praised the 2nd ancestor. 2nd ancestor, you really have a good technique. These wild beasts have already been bewitched by the 5th ancestor. However, they can still listen to your orders. From this, it can be seen that your attainment in the barbarian summoning technique is definitely above the 5th ancestor. Barbarian summoning technique is just a small Dao. It's not worth mentioning. Speaking of which, why did the 5th ancestor's barbarian summoning technique only attract the 2 of us? Why aren't the other barbarian ancestors here yet? The 2nd ancestor's cold eyes seemed to be able to pierce through the void. He looked at the direction of the Southly Fire Formation and licked his lips. He kept telling himself in his heart that he must be patient. He must wait for Ning Fan to have more barbarian marks. Only then would it be more delicious. Moreover, he had already heard from the fourth ancestor that there were two immortal venerables of the human race in front of them. It would not be an easy task to capture Ningfan in front of the two immortal venerables. He could only wait for the other barbarian ancestors to arrive before making his plan. With the strength of the two of us, we might not be able to defeat the two immortal venerables of the human race, even with the help of millions of wild beasts. However, the other barbarian ancestors have yet to arrive. Should we take the initiative to contact the immortal venerables of the demon race and ask for their help? The fourth ancestor suddenly said. No need. Be it the demon race or the human race, they are all just different races. The cooperation between us and the demon race is just to make use of each other. Those who are not of our race will certainly have different intentions. Before our cultivation base recovers, it's better for us to have as little contact with the demon race as possible. As soon as the second ancestor finished speaking, he sneered. Let's wait a little longer. When another barbarian ancestor arrives, we will take action and capture that child who is under the barbarian summoning technique. However, when the time comes, we must fatten him up before we slaughter him. Just 46 barbarian marks are not enough. I must at least help this child to attain 100 barbarian marks. In that case, it will be a great supplement. Ningfan did not know that the second ancestor was activating his divine ability to gather the wild beasts that had gone mad. Even though he did not know the truth of the matter, he could roughly guess that the sudden gathering of the wild beasts was not a good thing. At first he was in silence. Then he suddenly raised his head and looked in the direction of the first peak. Suddenly, he saw a golden-colored messenger flying sword with royal chi coming from the direction of the first peak. It was flying towards him at full speed. The messenger flying sword carried the aura force of an immortal venerables. If Ningfan was not mistaken, the owner of this aura force was none other than the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables. When the messenger flying sword reached a distance of 3 zhang away from Ningfan, it immediately trembled and exploded, forming waves of qi. Within the qi waves, a cold and emotionless voice of a middle-aged man could be heard. Cultivator Zhao Jian, quickly come to the first peak to greet me. No mistakes are allowed. The qi waves formed by the explosion of the flying sword were strong enough to reach a cultivator, who had ascended to the true origin realm. However, it naturally could not hurt Ningfan at all. However, the arrogant messenger in the flying sword made Ningfan's eyes instantly turn cold. After a while, he retracted his cold expression. He could naturally tell that the tone of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables was extremely unfriendly. It was certainly not a good thing for him to be summoned to the first peak. However, Ningfan still needed to rely on the protection of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables to stay in this place. As long as he stays in this place, he must abide by the rules of this place and obey the 9 orders and 16 prohibitions of this place. Among the 9 orders and 16 prohibitions, the first rule was that cultivators who were not from the puppet sect must always listen to the orders of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables. Those who disobey the rule would be killed without mercy. Now that the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables had sent out a messenger flying sword to summon Ningfan, he must go to the first peak. Otherwise, he would be regarded as disobeying the rule. You guys stay here and rest for a while. I'm going to the first peak, Ningfan told Xianloli and the others. Then he tapped the ground with the tip of his feet, and turned into a ray of golden light, disappearing in a flash. The distance between the third peak and the first peak was extremely far. However, with Ningfan's speed, he naturally arrived at the foot of the first peak in just a moment. He raised his head and glanced at the first peak. His eyes were slightly solemn. He saw that the entire first peak was surrounded by tens of thousands of flame runes. They surrounded the 9,000 zhang tall mountain, and spiraled upwards. On the second peak and the third peak, not a single blade of grass grew. Only the first peak was not only filled with many fiery red trees and flowers, but also a majestic palace. That palace was the place where the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables resided. However, it was not an easy task to reach the palace. The flame runes that blotted out the sky and covered the earth were connected to the entire Southly Fire Formation. If Ningfan directly flies to the top of the first peak, he would immediately trigger the runes and suffer the attacks of the entire Southly Fire formation. Even though this formation still had its flaws, its destructive power was definitely enough to make immortal venerables stop in their tracks since the intruder was inside the Grand Formation. Only by climbing the stone steps of the mountain to the top of the peak would he not trigger the attacks of the flame runes. Cultivator Zhao Jian, quickly climb to the top of the mountain and come see me. If you can't do this, die. The voice of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables suddenly drifted down from the top of the first peak and directly entered Ning Fan's ears. Ning Fan's eyes turned slightly cold. What he hated the most in his life was being threatened by others. However, the fact that the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables threatened him with death had already violated his principles. If he were to travel here alone, he would definitely fall out with the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables, just because of the threat of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables. Unfortunately, he was accompanied by the Immortal Lowly, Zhao Dai, and millions of barbarians for the safety of these people. Ning Fan had no choice but to rely on the grand formation of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables. He also had no choice but to endure this matter. He did not say anything else. Instead, he directly climbed the stone steps of the mountain and climbed to the top of the mountain step by step. When he reached the height of 1,000 zhang, thousands of flame runes suddenly rushed out of the mountain forest. They turned into a huge flaming hand and grabbed at Ning Fan. At the same time, the voice of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerables resounded in Ning Fan's ears. Thousands of Southly Fire talismans will turn into a Leaf Fire Palm imprint. It can kill a peak realm cultivator of the Crossing Truth realm. If you can't withstand this palm strike, you will die. This king doesn't believe that you're the immortal sovereign of all ancient times. This is a test. Ning Fan acted as if he did not hear the voice of the 6 Unity Immortal Venerable. His expression did not change at all. At the moment when the flaming palm approached him, he suddenly opened his mouth and swallowed the flaming palm, which was powerful enough to kill a peak crossing realm expert. Then he continued to climb up without a change in expression, as if he was not injured at all. He continued to climb, and when he reached the 30,000 feet mark, another 3,000 flame runes suddenly flew out from the forest. They gathered together to form a huge cauldron of raging flames. It descended from the sky and pressed down on his head. The power of a single suppression was enough to kill any shedding void realm cultivator. In this desolate land filled with the power that forbade immortals, even an early-stage thought-shattering cultivator like Mounz might not be able to withstand the suppression of this cauldron. 3,000 Southernly Fire talismans to form the Southernly Cauldron. If you can't withstand this technique, you will die. The 6 combos Celestial Supremacy's voice was heard slowly. Ning Fan glanced at the fire cauldron coldly. Relying on the incredible power of his great 5 elements physique, he directly stretched his 5 fingers towards the sky and crushed the fire cauldron. Ning Fan swallowed all of the cauldron-breaking flames in one gulp. As for him, he continued to climb upwards and climbed all the way to the 60,000 feet mark. When he reached the 60,000 feet mark, the 6,000 fire talismans suddenly appeared and condensed into a beautiful fire devil lady with a voluptuous body. That beautiful lady's appearance was not considered as peerlessly beautiful. She could only be considered as an average beauty. However, her eyes were so charming as if water could drip out of them. As soon as she appeared, she immediately gave Ning Fan a flirtatious smile. Her eyes seemed to be able to ignite the lust of any man. That kind of lust was called the Southernly Fire of Lust. It could incinerate any mid-shedding void realm cultivator to death. 6,000 Southernly Fire talismans. Can you withstand it? The 6 combos Celestial Supremacy's voice slowly resounded. Before his voice could stop, it suddenly turned into a soft, eh. Ning Fan was not bewitched by the beautiful fire devil lady at all. He did not even feel a trace of lust just because of that beautiful lady's glance. It was as if he did not see the beautiful fire devil lady at all. He directly ignored her and continued to climb upwards. When the beautiful fire devil lady realized that she could not bewitch Ning Fan, she immediately revealed a look of hatred. She let out a sinister laugh and suddenly rushed towards Ning Fan. She even spat out a sword of void fire that was condensed from the fire of lust. She wanted to kill Ningfan. The destructive power of this sword was almost at the level of a late-shedding Void Realm cultivator. Facing this sword, Ningfan did not dodge at all. Instead, he allowed the Sword of Lust to slash at him. The sword was obviously extremely sharp. However, when it slashed at Ningfan's body, the sound of metal colliding could be heard. Ningfan did not rely on the defense of his physical body to block this sword. Instead, he relied on the 6 desires bone in his body. He had the physique of the 6 desires bone, and the great 5 elements physique. He was not afraid of lust or fire. How could this sword hurt him? Stand down. Ningfan suddenly turned his head and stared at the beautiful fire devil lady coldly. His gaze actually emitted a chilling aura, causing the fire talismans in her body to immediately go out of control. She let out a miserable shriek and directly exploded. Her body turned into countless fire talismans and flew back into the forest. After doing all this, Ningfan continued to climb upwards. All the way to the peak, he did not encounter any more difficulties. At the peak of the first peak, there was only a lonely palace. When Ningfan arrived at that place, his body flashed and directly appeared inside the palace. At the moment, there were 2 people standing inside the palace. One of them was a 6 Directions Immortal Venerate while the other one was Venerate Miao Yan. When the 6 Directions Immortal Venerate saw Ningfan successfully arrive at that place, his eyes became extremely sharp. However, there was also a hint of surprise in his eyes. As for Venerate Miao Yan, she gave Ningfan a friendly smile. However, there was also a hint of worry in her smile. She was worried about Ningfan's safety. If Ningfan encounters any danger on his way to the peak, she would certainly take action and save him. She would never allow the 6 Directions Immortal Venerate to harm him. I wonder why the 6 Directions Immortal Venerate has summoned me to this place. If there's nothing else, I will be returning to the 3rd peak. Ningfan and the 6 Directions Immortal Venerate were 10 zhang away from each other. They stared at each other coldly. Even though his cultivation base was far weaker than the 6 Directions Immortal Venerate, if they really fight, the 6 Directions Immortal Venerate would not be able to gain any advantage. Cultivator Zhaojian, do you know which of the 9 orders and 16 prohibitions you have broken? The 6 Directions Immortal Venerate said expressionlessly. However, there was an innate coldness and arrogance in his expression. Ningfan did not answer him. He just stared at the 6 Directions Immortal Venerate quietly. Seeing that Ningfan actually dared to ignore his question, the 6 Directions Immortal Venerate finally frowned and showed a displeased expression. Venerate Miao Yan slowly walked to Ningfan's side and stood side by side with him. She used her actions to show that she was on Ningfan's side. Her beautiful eyes turned slightly cold as she said, "Fellow Taoist Liu, what you're doing now seems to be different from what you've said before. Didn't you say that you summoned fellow Taoist Zhao here, because you have something to ask of him? Why are you making things difficult for him again and again? This seems to be a little too much." Oh, fellow Taoist Miao Yan seems to be very protective of this junior. If he really is an ancient immortal venerate, I naturally have something to ask of him. The previous test was just to confirm his cultivation base. There's no need for fellow Taoist Miao Yan to get angry. As soon as he finished speaking, the 6 Directions Immortal Venerate looked at Ningfan again. The coldness in his eyes faded slightly and he said, "I have set up the 9 orders and 16 prohibitions. The 3rd order states that no one in the Southly Fire Formation is allowed to hide their identity. Otherwise, they will be regarded as someone with ulterior motives and will be killed. The 6th order states that no one who might endanger the safety of the fire formation is allowed to enter the fire formation. However, fellow Taoist Miao Yan told me that you are under the barbarian summoning technique of the barbarian race. Now you are being chased by tens of thousands of wild beasts." After hearing what he said, Ningfan looked at Venerate Miao Yan. Venerate Miao Yan revealed a guilty expression. She told the 6 Directions Immortal Venerate about Ningfan being under the barbarian summoning technique. Originally, she wanted to ask the 6 Directions Immortal Venerate to help Ningfan break the technique. However, she did not expect that it would become a reason for the 6 Directions Immortal Venerate to pick a fight with him. Cultivator Zhao Jian, you are under the barbarian summoning technique. You don't have the right to enter this place to hide. If you stay here, it is highly likely that you will attract the attacks of countless wild beasts. Countless cultivators will die because of you. This is not worth it. Even though fellow Taoist Miao Yin has asked me to help you get rid of the barbarian summoning technique in your body, why should I help you? All the more, you shouldn't continue to wear the ghost mask and hide your identity after entering this place. Take off your ghost mask and tell me your true identity. If you don't take off your ghost mask within 3 breaths. As soon as he said that, the 6 directions immortal venerate raised his finger and pointed at the ground. The entire first peak immediately shook and rumbled. The flame runes between heaven and earth surged madly towards Ning Fan, as if they were going to attack him at any time. This time, it would no longer be 1,000, 3,000 or 6,000 flame runes attacking him. This time, it would be all the flame runes in the entire Southly Fire formation. If the flame runes were to descend, it would be enough to kill all cultivators below the immortal venerable realm. Enough! Venerate Miao Yan's beautiful eyes turned cold. He did not give those flame runes a chance to descend at all. He directly waved his hand and an extremely profound starlight was drawn between his fingers, dispersing all the flame runes. The reason why fellow Taoist 6 directions keeps making things difficult for fellow Taoist Zhao is just to find an excuse to test fellow Taoist Zhao's immortal venerable realm cultivation base. Fine. I will do as you wish and test fellow Taoist Zhao's cultivation base for you. Of course, she would not attack Ning Fan. She produced a trace of purple starlight between her fingers and drew a line in front of her. The space in front of her was immediately cut open. What she opened was her natal kiliacosm. It was used to store some relatively precious items that she had to carry with her at all times. With a gentle wave of her palm, Venerate Miao Yin took out a treasure from her natal kiliacosm. She raised her head and smiled apologetically at Ning Fan. I have wronged fellow Taoist Zhao for what happened today. Initially, I planned to look for fellow Taoist Zhao after meeting Venerate 6 directions, and give you this treasure to thank you for saving my life. Now, however, I can take it out in front of you and use it to verify your immortal venerable realm cultivation base. Naturally, I can make 6 directions speechless. Perhaps it was because she was too dissatisfied with Venerate 6 directions. Venerate Miao Yin did not even address him as fellow Taoist anymore. She quietly took out the treasure without a trace of reluctance or heartache. From her point of view, no matter how precious this treasure was, it was not enough to repay Ning Fan for saving her life. As the light of the treasure spread, Ning Fan's expression actually changed a little. As for Venerate 6 directions, he immediately became displeased and said with a stern voice, Miao Yan, you and I have already made a promise. After this treasure has been nurtured, you will sell it to me at the price of 3 monarch spiritual fruits. Why are you giving it to someone else? Promise? I seem to have only promised to consider this matter. I have never promised fellow Taoist anything else. Now, however, I want to give this treasure to fellow Taoist Zhao. What can you do to me? Venerate Miao Yin giggled and turned to look at Ning Fan. When she saw the change in Ning Fan's eyes which only flashed for a second, she could not help but praise Ning Fan's calmness inwardly. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.